All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Dog Trainer Podcast, episode 156. Today we're being joined by Dale McCluskey, the long-awaited conversation. Let's get him on. Looks like he's in the waiting room. Morning. How are you?
Good, David. How are you?
Hang it in there.
That's good. Thanks for having me on.
Happy to. I'm excited to have this conversation. I know it started off a little back and forth, obviously, as it always does via YouTube comments and stuff, but I'm happy that we're able to make it happen, and I'm excited to
appreciate that.
Get in the conversation here and just kind of get a little bit of a feel for, what your, what some of your stances really are, and kind of dive into them and, see where, we disagree, see where we might agree on things, and see if we could get everybody a little bit better of an understanding of where people are kind of at in this industry. So,
okay.
Why don't you kind of start off by, giving everybody a little bit of a background? I believe I saw you were a police canine handler, if that's correct.
But yeah, David, police canine. I have over 30 years experience training dogs. So my background is police canine. Started our department, police canine department's first canine unit, and with Ruben, first police dog. And so from there, working with the local prisons, so we shared services. So this is back in 1993. So this is a little while ago. Yeah. And so from there, I've, transitioning from, so for again, my background awards, I don't get into a lot of this, I don't market myself as what, but I believe we still hold the award for having the youngest police dog make a street level drug find in Canada. So that's an article.
Yeah.
It's on my thing. And so, so from there, going from the relationship with Ruben, and this is where really the system of training really developed is the question is, what is it really about? What's a process, again, coming from police canine into the public realm, just average dog owners, and looking around and saying, okay, there's something wrong here right away. There's something wrong here. Why is it that so many people are continue to struggle in the relationship with the dogs, even after investing time and money into this very popular idea that training is a learning-based exercise? Understand that's the whole focus of, of what I'm showing is the problem in the dog training world. Because here's the thing, and I'll keep coming back to this, once a relationship problem is already underway between a dog and owner, because you have to ask yourself the question, why is a dog owner coming to a dog owner for help in the first place? Mm-hmm. It's because they're experiencing a relationship problem, right? So, trainers, balanced trainers, force-free trainers. So understand, I'll talk a little bit about my flipping the script series because I understand that's inciting, a lot of controversy, right? But what I'm really doing here is I'm calling out this idea. People take it personal as to what I'm saying. But again, I always default back, look at the state of the dog training world. We'll talk about some of that. Mm-hmm. There's no accidents or coincidences. Everything points directly towards what I'm saying in terms of this very popular idea that trains a learning-based exercise. And so the problem is, in terms of motivating dogs to respond, once a relationship problem is already underway, and the inherently flawed assumptions trainers are making at that level in terms of perception of dogs changing. Because the question is, well, how are trainers actually qualifying that the perception of dogs are actually changing without the core ingredients? This goes back to how I approach training, David, as an intervention, without the core ingredients of control and influence. We'll talk about that, as to what's revealed in terms of relationship problem, as well as change itself. And so going back to my background again, in fact, I put out an article here. I just took this off my wall behind me here. Canine Cop magazine. I'm a publisher. I'm a writer for this magazine. It goes out worldwide. So I did an article here on what is obedience training. This is published. And so just so I'm not talking out the end of my butt here somewhere about the problems is the questions that, again, what's happened in the dog training world. So many trainers, and I understand this isn't just to pick on balanced dog trainers. I want to understand, David, people probably take, I put out a couple of videos about, so by flipping the script series, and this is even why sometimes, I know you brought this up, is why did Dale puts up a bunch of videos. He takes them down after a couple. Well, this goes into the issue of not just the level of divisiveness, okay, that's happening in the dog training world, to the level of receiving death threats. People get so fired up about this issue because this plays into the issue of identity. this is a type of belief system. This is morphed into a belief system in the dog training world, this idea that trains a learner-based exercise. So it comes down to this issue about, again, so I put up my Flipping the Script series, okay, going through it in terms of calling out basically a product. Because here's the point. I mean, you as a balanced dog trainer, you're putting up video content to make money. I mean, we all do it, right? To market, to make money. And it's not putting up, like, just not offering your services for free, right?
Sure.
It's a product. So trainers are in this, almost at this level now where they think that they're in some sort of special category. And this goes in the issue about not being able to discuss the real problem in the dog training world, right? Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, so it's like saying that they're just beyond anyone even talking about what the real issue is, because the point of the issue here, even in terms of, I thought about the Ivan Belanov situation, how your kind of video, how you kind of entered into my Flipping the Script series, sure. Right?
Yeah, I saw you say that.
More by accident.
Yeah.
But the very video, David, I put up, and again, as I go through my Flipping the Script series, so I'm going through balance training. Mm-hmm. I'm going through force-free training. I'm going through various concepts such as, counter conditioning, the context of agreeableness. I talk about, the deceptive nature of appearances and why even the blame shifting, the amount of dogs that are being blamed as a result of a faulty picture within the framework of response, right?
Sure.
Saying, well, there must be something wrong with the dog. Mm-hmm. Or we'll talk about this issue about remote collars, because this kind of goes into your realm here. Sure. Why can't you get remote collars off dogs? Some balanced trainers just like, well, just leave it on the dog. So, but this goes into the issue about a process that lines up, brings influence into, right? Brings influence into the equation the right way, in which a dog's perceptions change at the right level. Sure. Okay. So, but again, this is where David and I talk about the parenting example. I keep going back to the parent and child, the relationship as the foundational example to understand the problem in the dog training world, because it lines up in terms of, dogs as social animals, how they connect with us that way, our in terms of relationship, in terms of our influence that way, in terms of that connection, the social connection. And no different than a parent, their role, the influence they have. Sorry, Dad. I mean, go ahead. If you want to put a point in there.
So let me just, I don't even have a specific point. I just want to kind of, I want people to take something away from this conversation, obviously, as I'm sure you do, sure. Right? And I think one of the biggest problems of, in this, I want to make it very clear, because I know you in the past, you've had trainers, be very like personal with their attacks towards you before. I want to make it very clear that's not, but regardless, right? So I want to make it very clear, this is not a personal attack, but like all that right there that you just pitched, right? That it was like 8 minutes or so of you talk. You went in so many different directions right there, right? Well, and there's so many. But hang on. Let me finish that. Let me finish that thought real quick, right? So you went in so many different directions, and there's so many interesting conversations within all of those different directions you went in.
Absolutely.
But there was no like completion of thought of any individual one of them. So I started like just jotting down as you were talking, and I stopped like halfway through. I got like 5 different points that you started kind of making that really need to be digging further into. You know what I mean?
And I'll get into all, but here's another point, David, because you brought this up in one of your conversations about, Dale's just spinning his conversation. I don't understand. But here's the point. Okay, the dog training world is coming apart at the seams. Sure. Okay, you've seen devices being banned.
Yeah.
You're seeing the Zach George versus the dog daddy. You saw the Jeff Gellman situation. Now, I understand why I mentioned names here. Okay, I want to be clear about this. This isn't meant to be a personal attack.
I understand.
Okay,
I understand that.
On any of these trainers. Even when I go through my Flipping the Script series, I encourage people can watch it. Mm-hmm. You will not hear me getting personal with any trainers. This is information specific. Now, I mean, these trainers get taken very personal, right?
Sure.
Because they feel like Dale's calling me out.
Sure.
But you're selling a product. Yeah. All I'm saying is the product is the problem here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm saying there's a problem.
Yeah, and I'm not even saying that, right? Like I you mentioned a few times like the Ivan situation of like you used a couple minutes of his video, and I think the entire thing, frankly. And mine's up, and yours you said got like a copyright like down on it or something like that. Listen, I'm on your side as far as that's concerned.
Okay,
like,
well, I was going to say, Dave.
No. I'm
Go ahead.
totally on your side as far as that's concerned. I am like one of the firmest believers in like not censoring opinions and things like that. I've got a handful of reaction videos of other trainers myself that I've done where I try to be same deal, like you've said, like information specific about things. And my issue, and also it's like, it's barely even a freaking issue, I would say. But my issue is just like we had this conversation lined up, and it's like I would have wanted to save all those points so we could have hashed into them in individual detail.
Hey,
but I don't care that you're making
listen,
videos,
David,
right?
here's the thing. I'm just rolling forward here.
Sure.
I mean, don't take it personal, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, like, I'm that guy. I'm like 57 years old, so I'll go down some rabbit trails here. It's probably an age thing too. But here's the thing. You know, and I want to bring cohesion to this conversation but here's the other point I make. I said, listen, some of the trainers, balanced dog trainers, have all the time in the world to invest thousands of hours right into going to conference, whatever, putting each other up in live stream. If the dog training world is falling apart, and because this is one of my kind of pushbacks on people saying, well, Dale's just rambling. If it's that important, right, to figure this out, because there's a serious problem here.
Sure.
You would think that the trainers would actually take the time, right, to audit what's happening, like I did. Because here's the point. When I first started here, David, and when I looked around, going back to when I started back in 1990, really I got in the dog training field like 2007.
Sure.
And looking around, because this comes into ethics here. This comes into as individuals. Looking around the dog training world saying, there's a serious problem here. Why is it that people are failing within using the same methods, the same idea of things, and looking at saying, is it really the dog's fault here at this level? Like, look the blame shifting going on. So it comes down to this thing saying, well, if there's something, here's the crux of everything. If there's something that we're doing wrong as the human, okay, if we're putting an idea out there that is problematic, the presses should stop. If we really have empathy for dogs the right way, not even one dog should be taking the hit because of something we're doing wrong, an idea we're putting out into the marketing. Everything should halt. That's never happened. Okay, with these trainers as individuals, because here's a tribal thing of this. Okay, once you go into as a balanced dog trainer or force-free dog trainer, okay, goes into this type of belief system. It's almost too late. And I'll talk about that because then you've come into agreement, okay, with this idea of things. And so blame shifting will seem at a certain level to be normal. Well, there must be, the DNA with the dog, and it's got to be this, got to be that. You can't get these remote collars off the dogs. Well, just leave it on 24/7. Balanced dog trainers do that a lot. I'll just leave it on the dog. And this goes into the crux of going back to these situations I talk about. There are no accidents, okay? Like in terms of the Jeff Gelman situation, which I'll talk about because it ties into the issue, like the comment I made about one of your videos with the startled reaction of the dog. Okay. And I could use a word like as you crank that dog. I don't do that, right? So you get this thing about okay. So, but the startled reaction part is the same as what happened to Gelman. Gelman got crucified, right? But here's the interesting thing: by many of his own. In balanced dog trainers piling onto that situation. And people like yourself should be asking, like, why is that? Like, what's really going on here? Why is it that Canine One, and again, I mentioned the name, they did a video, they put it out. This is all public. You can go in, everything I say today, you can go do your own research. Canine One did a video calling out Gelman, saying he's a dog abuser. And other dog trainers did that too. Peter Kane, there's other trainers put up videos, he's a dog abuser. And piling on to Gelman. And so Canine One's video was actually used by Steve Dale, the force-free agenda, to try to cancel Gelman. Like that's incredible when you think of it. Okay, like what's really so people can come at me and say, I don't like what Dale's saying.
Can I just stop you for a second real quick? So again, I want to, like, we're adding even more like individual conversations onto the list here, right? Let's just, because you've said that one a couple times now, the Gelman situation, right? Let's pick a topic here and kind of dive into it a little bit, right?
Sure, Dave. Yeah, go ahead.
So the Gelman situation. I do agree. Like, every side obviously went after Jeff Gelman for it. And, I don't like using the word like fan of certain people, obviously, but I have a good relationship with Jeff Gelman. Obviously I've used bonkers myself before in the past with dogs, right? I think that situation was completely blown out of proportion with things. And I don't like that everybody was jumping on that also as a way of like kind of boosting themselves up of being like the nice aversive trainer, right? Or the nice trainer that uses aversives in order to fight back against this push of already people don't like these tools and all that kind of stuff. But you mentioned, like like, why did trainers do that? So in your opinion, why did trainers do that as far as all piling on top of him? And what do you think the reasoning leading up to that? Like why is that so important to your conversation that you're trying to put out there?
Because there's a lack of depth, okay? I talk about this idea about training being a learning-based exercise, okay? It plays off of motivating dogs, right, to respond at the very, and that's why I keep tying in, David, to because here's the thing, if I go sideways a little bit, go back and forth, I have to, because you have to have a foundation first. Sure. Like if I talk about a situation like the Gelman situation, okay, the inability, that reaction from that dog, which triggered, really, it caused like death threats to him. Gelman went through hell.
Yeah, no, I know.
And he do, and so look at everything he went through. But my point of everything is to say, when you take these situations, this is why going through my Flipping the Script series, those should be opportunities as an individual to ask the questions that many trainers have never asked.
Sure.
Right? They just took a hold of this ID and ran with it to say, okay, why did that situation happen? And I talked through it. I put a couple videos on that. Very, people can go on, and the problem is people, and this is the problem, people look at my stuff, they're already sold into this belief system. But here's the thing. Okay, going back to Gelman. So the dog was startled. I talk about why that happened, came from a third party. So Gelman threw down the towel. And I talk about the dog making sense of, because dogs are social animals. So it ties in, right? So that connection that they share with us. So making sense means that, I talk about the role of influence. Once a relationship problem is underway, how that's defined. Okay, how that filters through the relationship by way of the owner. So, for example, I talked through it, and so when Gelman threw down that towel, number one, it's reactionary, which means the dog, and this goes into your video I talked about with that startle reaction.
We'll
so the dog's already, the control's already manifest. Okay, so the dog is already looking towards, in Gelman's situation, the dog's already looking towards the other dog. The dog was there for reactivity issues. And so, and the owner's standing there, right, kind of passive, right? She's not doing, so it's all kind of on Gelman. Gelman comes out.
I believe if I'm not mistaken, she was like in a wheelchair, and like she physically was just sitting there because she couldn't do that.
And we'll get into that too, because if influence is proactive, David, and so it goes into my videos, like taking the form of a nudge. Okay, if you're really proactive with being dialed into a dog's state of mind, and this is the conversation we have about the issue of the role of influence, interrupting, intercepting, stinking thinking, because this is one of the big disconnects with balanced dog trainers. We'll talk about, I'll get into that. But here's the thing. Let's stick on the Gelman thing, right? So you bring up a point.
So I understand, right? So you said obviously it was a third party doing it. The dog couldn't make sense. Third party doing it.
The dog's like, what the heck happened? Didn't make sense to the dog. All right. So it's like, so the dog had a startle reaction. That wasn't abuse. I want to be very clear about that. That's confusion. So, but it's confusion.
Well, what if you say that's just the dog was startled? Right.
Well, the dog's also the dog's there for a reason, right? Relationship problem.
But the act of throwing the bonker at the dog startled the dog, right? So are you?
But Dave, it's got to make sense too. It's going to be proactive, right? So, for example, I say about the owner, if the owner was turned around the opposite direction, I detail this I know she has physical challenges, but if she's turned around the opposite direction, so the dog is not already the dog isn't already seeing the other dog, so that's going to manifest itself through control, because the issue about relationship issues, just like I talked about the selfish child, the more selfish a child gets, behavior issues escalate. The more control a dog holds in a relationship, behavior issues escalate, and it manifests through the dog's state of mind. Okay, dog is going to see, so it's thinking. Dog sees the other dog. Dog's already going to start to fixate. Going to start to, you're starting to move into that level where the dog is going to fully express, lunge forward, control. Okay, so right away you have that expressive state already happening. You take the bonker, so right away, not dialed in. As I say dialed in, that owner could have already been nudging. That's why I talk about, when people look at my video,
nudging. Yeah, so
nudging, right?
So you
nudging
use
the dog.
Yeah, so you used. I've heard you use, obviously nudging before. I've heard you use intercepting. I've heard you use interrupting, right? So like you've got many different, terms that you kind of use for that, and I'm assuming all three of those generally are pretty similar. Intercepting,
pretty similar,
nudging,
but here's the thing.
Interrupting.
Yeah, it'd be like Yeah, be like a selfish child,
Right.
right? It'd be like a parent already knows the
Yeah,
child self say, "Hey," it's like a "Hey, you, hey."
I understand. I understand.
You understand?
But
Like, I want to be clear about
your intention of your nudging or your intercepting or your interrupting, right, is to stop that thought process. Is that correct?
That's right. The thought process is like interrupt. It's not defined in a way say you can never go towards another dog. I want to be clear. It's like
Sure.
it's like the dog. It's intent here.
No, your
So you're not.
interruption is specifically for the thought that leads to the behavior,
That well,
right?
it's when you use the behavior. When dog trainers use behavior, it's not a con. It doesn't even fit there. A lot of times it's a response. Sometimes when you're getting a dog,
But isn't that a behavior, right? How is it
I
different?
will talk about that
How's
too.
it
It's misapplied. It's based on a superficial idea here, Dave.
Yeah.
Behaviors that the word behavior alludes to that there's something more meaningful happening based on this superficial the trains a learning based exercise, right?
Yeah, but a behavior simply is I don't even know. Can you pull up the definition of behavior? Like what a behavior I don't think has all of this like intent and specific like that to it. I think behavior is simply a thing that you're exhibiting. Is it not?
It's a better terminology. It's an express state. It's like a selfish child, right? A selfish child is really selfish.
All right, so behavior. Wait, where is it here? The way. Okay, no, this is similar. The way in which one acts or conducts oneself, especially towards others. Right. So wouldn't that be the definition of a dog exhibiting reactivity towards another dog?
Yeah, but we have to get into this thing about why you're there in the first place with the dog.
Well, I know, but
like that's the message. There's no depth to this idea, right?
Yeah, but it's a behavior, right? It is a behavior, right? Like the dog reacting.
It's a behavior,
right?
But how balanced dog trainers use that word?
Yeah, but I'm just talking in the literal definition of the word.
Okay, we can go literal. Yeah, we can go literal.
Right?
Yeah. Well, sure. Okay. All right. Let's not get caught up in the semantics of what the word. But I'm talking about when I think about when I train dogs, I'm not focused on a sit the way that balanced dog trainers are focused on sit.
We're not even talking about sits right now.
A dog will end up there, right? But it's a core ingredients. I talk about control and influence as they align through defining a process by way of a intervention, which balanced dog trainers approach it as a learning-based exercise, right? Which they're wrong in. I mean, I understand the dog training world here is wrong in how they're approaching relationship problems.
Sure. So, but again, we're talking this specific example, right, of the Gelding situation, right? And I described, you said, the owner could have been nudging or intercepting or interrupting the dog prior to the dog exhibit, because your goal is to stop the thinking process that leads to the behavior of reactivity.
Into agreeableness, right? The dog becoming agreeable, and you'll see it. You'll see if you watch my videos, okay, you'll see the tangible result of the dog's head turning slightly inward towards the owner, and you have these moments of relaxation. Agreeable. Okay. But you actually have to watch the video.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I mean, that's the problem.
So this is where clearly defining, like you said, like you don't like that dog trainers use certain, words, right, or phrases or whatever incorrectly, right?
Well, because it misleads people into believing certain things that aren't true.
But
because they're saying change of behavior. Well, what do you? No, it's actually about relationship.
Yeah, but what it's about, like why the dog is exhibiting it, is a separate conversation from the fact that it's still a behavior, right?
Well, you can but here's the thing. I already know the problem with balanced dog training, how the dogs don't connect at that level in terms of being dialed into the relationship the way I talk about dog state of mind, right? Because it's balanced dog trainers are in a reactive posture, right? I use the example of how you want to describe a balanced dog trainer, because this is the example I use a lot. Mm-hmm. It's like going back to the parenting example.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the parent, like when you have a relationship problem happening with a selfish child, right? You're keying up on certain indicators that's the case, right? They're not getting along with their peers. They're not sharing their toys. They're being disrespectful to the parent. Right? There are all these different things.
Problems. Yes.
Yeah. So you're taking all the information. You're arriving at a point as a parent to say, "Hey, I'm dealing with a relationship problem here. The child is now selfish."
Yeah.
Right. And so from that point forward, and the problem in the dog training world, how they approach this is it's like Santa Claus walking in. From that point, like bringing a so-called professional in your home, it's like Santa Claus walking into your home environment, and you as a parent dealing with a selfish child. And the professional coming in, and the only thought in their head is, how can I get this child to respond, to perform some good responses? Think about the sit down, come and step. To perform some good responses so I can just sell those to the parent, like you're good to go. You can
Sure.
trust those responses, but I
Yeah.
talk about the, but here's
I
the thing.
think
When I
we
talk about
agree, I think we agree on that actually. So can I just like interject and say like looking
Go ahead.
using your example of you've used the example of once a child has become selfish, right? And how somebody coming in with a bag of goodies and then you teach the sit down and stay so that the dog or the dog or the human or the child or whatever doesn't sit on their Xbox and mouth off to their mom, because they don't want to stop, because they incentivize them to do something else. And can you trust those responses and stuff? Like I agree completely with you, actually. How I would approach those situations as a balanced dog trainer, and you could tell me where I'm incorrect in this, if you think I'm incorrect with this, is I would reverse engineer how did these problems get created in the first place, right? So let's say you mentioned,
then you actually have to look at the parenting style.
Sure.
I talk about causation, right?
Sure. But even from a specific individual standpoint, right? Like you use the example of at the store, right? The child pulling the toys off of the shelf, right? And obviously being selfish because they want those toys. And if they make this big stink and pull them off onto the other kids' heads and stuff like that, obviously the mom is going to, where did that behavior get created? Probably the parent never told the child no. And anytime that child tried to put up a stink or throw a fit or whatever it may be in order to get their way in that situation, the parent ultimately gave into it. And that's the same exact thing we see with owners and dogs all the time.
What's the parenting style? Permissive, right?
Yeah, permissive. It's the same thing, right? Like they're being permissive from the standpoint of their giving way to the child.
That's right.
Is that kind of correct?
That's right. But once you actually reach the stage of having a relationship problem, the child's already selfish.
Sure.
The parental role itself, again, I talk about the role of influence.
Sure.
Okay. Taking the form of a demand. Just think this way. Like, when is the attitude of the child actually revealed? The bad attitude
when
of the
you're
child.
trying to get them to do something that they don't want to do.
Yeah, they're putting a demand on.
Yes.
Right? Influence, right? Sure. Versus,
they're not
here's a dog training
to
world.
The parent, right?
Yeah, versus here's, saying, hey, take the garbage out because you're the parent. Versus, here's a dog training world. Here's $100.
Sure.
Take the garbage out and you get $100. But here's the disconnect here with the dog training world. Based on the current state of the relationship being dialed into, right, what represents behavioral issues, right, control manifesting through the relationship, dogs gaining control, dogs as pack as social animals, pack animals, how they connect with us that way, is the problem. The disconnect here is that you're starting to motivate a response from a dog. And I even talked about this issue about balanced training, trying to build off of this inherently flawed idea by way of what's called the 4 quadrants. So bringing influence in at a certain level doesn't trump getting out from underneath this problem by way of how a counterfeit picture develops for so many dogs and owners within the framework of response. Because here's the thing. It's like, here's $100, take the garbage out. Well, guess what the majority of trainers do? We'll pull out the treats. I see you wearing a treat bag, pulling out the treats, right? Because the thinking is, it's just like someone walking, how can I get a dog to respond to a great sit? And this is why you get dogs looking fantastic in the training environment, right? Moving around, doing a great sit down, come and stay. And perceptions of many dogs aren't actually changing, because here's the premise. How do you actually qualifying or even establishing that those responses can be trusted without the core ingredients happening in the first place by way of control and intentional control and influence?
Yeah,
take the garbage out, Dave. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
I completely understand what you're saying. And again, I think
you're assuming that they can be trusted.
Well, hold on. Hang on. Let me step in for a second here, because
go ahead.
Because I'm trying to take this a little bit more specific, and I'm trying to describe how I would handle the situation, right? So you can let me know, because the way you're describing is not how I would handle the situation. Right.
Oh, I know that already. I've already seen the video. So go ahead.
Well,
I'm happy in queue here. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So let's take what example do we want to? I mean, we're switching from children to dogs, right? So let's use the dog example, right? And we want to. So basically, the role of the problem here that you're saying, right, or the big issue here is that you're never actually putting the dog in a position where you're putting a demand on them and enforcing that demand. Is that correct?
It has to.
Is that where the problem kind of lies? Ultimately, you have to ensure that when the dog does not want to do something, that they understand that they still have to do that thing.
Well, no, here's the thing. The core ingredients have to come into the process itself, Dave. The process itself has to be defined properly. When I say interaction-based, because the problem here is the issue about motivation.
Sure.
Okay. The idea here is that how can I motivate this dog to respond? That's the wrong way to think. Okay. The motivator is the relationship, the social connection. Dogs desire to connect with us at that level. That's the motivation. Okay. Then when you're in the middle of a relationship problem, what's the fix? To reverse, how do you bring influence into a process at the right level, aligned the right way, dialed in the right way? It happens through a intentional interaction-based method, okay, which looks like, so if you watch my video, say, wow, Dale's like forcing these dogs. That's a common frame up, right? Forcing these dogs. Well, I'm approaching the relationship differently. I'm approaching a process differently. Mm-hmm. The difficulty here with many trainers is they're already indoctrinated. It's a type of belief system. Understand something. When I sit down, here's the point, Dave. When I sit down, you can laugh all you want. When I sit down with a dog owner,
I get what you're saying. I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing at the fact that, like, I want to really talk about like specifics here right now.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And that's what I'm here for. I want to get it. Okay. So, but when I sit down with an average dog owner, David, that isn't a balanced trainer, who hasn't, embraced this idea, right? I sit down with the average dog owner, less than 15 minutes, no problems, okay? I use the parenting example. I talk about why train the way train. If you sit down with a balance, not you, okay, I'll give you, here's the thing. I'm going to give you props here, right? I appreciate you, the fact that and this goes to this issue about censorship.
Sure.
About stuff, David, I want to just take a really quick side thing here. And like we're doing now, the ability to actually work through a problem. And there's a serious problem in the dog training world.
Sure.
The ability to work through is the right to be offended at a certain level.
Sure.
Not because of personal attack, but because
everybody has an ego, right? And everybody to some extent is going to get offended by things. But being able to step past that and discuss the root of the problem, which is what we're trying to do right now, I think is important.
That's right. And I appreciate the time you're taking. So I lost my. I have a senior moment here. Remind me. Get me back on track, Dave.
I actually am not sure exactly where you left off with that. I think you were talking about it. Okay, yeah. Here's where you were going with it. You were saying, and I've heard you say this on your videos before. You were saying that you could sit down with a client, right, and you spend 15 minutes with them, and the client understands what you're saying, right, or they're in agreeableness to what you're saying, right. It makes sense to them, right.
It makes sense, Dave.
It makes sense. It makes sense. Right? But you're saying that you sit down with a balanced dog trainer. That's not the case.
No, it's balanced, force free, or whatever.
Any other dog trainer that disagrees with.
They'll go on for 10,000 years, and you'll never, and because they take it personal, right? They start to get personal, right? And then the question I have to ask is, well, why are people getting so triggered off and getting personal attacks? See all these personal attacks, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we should be able to talk through and say, here's the thing. This is always my default setting, right? The dog training world's a mess. It's not an accident.
Sure.
And the blame shifting, the amount of dogs being given up on and blamed for because of this idea, I tie this in, is unbelievable.
I agree. And I agree with both of those points as well.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, hey, this is the issue. I know it's like challenging because I'm stepping forward here saying, here's the source of the problem in the dog training world. Because here's the other thing. People go on about, well, there's more than one way to train a dog. That statement's been around forever.
Sure.
But even think about the context of that statement itself.
Yeah.
Based on appearances, based on how both these groups, balance and force free, are motivating dogs to respond. And then here's the other contradiction. There's contradictions all over the place in the dog training world. As a balanced dog trainer is trying to call out force free trainers all the time. I provide examples in my Flipping the Script series of why that fails.
Sure.
Right? Because you're saying, oh, well, there's one way to train a dog. Yeah, force free trainers, they do a great, we use clickers. And here's the difference between a balanced dog trainer that uses clickers or this idea about learning-based theory. Years ago, David, when I was invited to sit down alongside clicker trainers in Canada, to a large veterinarian organization, I refused. Okay? I refused because I understand the problems by way of approaching a relationship problem as a learning-based exercise. I understand what that generates, what that sets up for people, the blame shifting that happens, right? And so I refuse. There's the line. But here's the thing. There's no line in the dog training world. Balanced dog trainers are still fighting with each other over the role of remote callers. You look at that conversation between Ivan Belanoff and Larry Crone, right? Mm-hmm. There's examples everywhere.
Sure.
And saying, well, they're fighting, right, over the role of remote callers as they're being banned.
Sure.
right? That's unbelievable. And so people accuse me of Dale's crazy. Dale's crazy talk. I know. I mean, the plot has already been lost.
Sure.
Here.
Okay. So
devices are being.
Yeah. So real quick. So getting back to, you mentioned you were using the example of you sit down with a client for 15 minutes. They get it. You sit down with a balanced dog trainer, a force-free trainer, and you'll argue for hours and you'll never find any sort of common ground because they're indoctrinated into the belief system, the state of mind. I would push back on that and say that I could sit down with any client, and because I'm sitting down with them as a position of authority, I probably am going to be able to convince them of just about anything I want to, because they don't have the knowledge to be able to push back on anything that it is that I'm saying. Where I could do that, I could go to 3 different mechanics. I don't know anything about cars, Deal. I mean, you probably know something about cars. You probably know way more about cars than I do, right? I don't know anything about cars. I could sit down with 3 different mechanics. One can tell me one thing. I could be like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense, right? Because they say it in layman's terms that makes sense to me, whatever. I could sit down with another one. They could explain to me why everything that one said was totally wrong and why their way is correct. And I could be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then I could sit down with a third that could then probably get me to think that the other 2 were completely incorrect. And that's because I have no basis of knowledge, right? As dog trainers or as an expert in whatever field that you're in, we could articulate things in a way where it makes sense, regardless of if it's actually as accurate as we're saying that it is.
Well, David, that's only half of I'll add to that, because based on what this idea represents through learning theory, right? People getting the pet all over their dogs, get to motivate the dogs with treats the way they're doing it in dog training. Well, really think about what I'm saying here.
Sure.
The reason why Zach George has millions of followers, right? Balanced dog trainers, this has gotten so twisted. Even the context of popularity in the dog training world, because the idea itself, the process itself plays into this permissive, right? This feelings-based idea that the dog owner doesn't really have to change how they think. The role of influence and control are not part of a process. It doesn't take the path of an intervention. It shines the light on the dog owner differently, David. So it's very easy for a balanced dog trainer or a force-free trainer to be very popular playing off of this idea that way.
Sure. And I agree completely with you. I completely agree with you that trainers that are approaching things, forget learning-based exercise, but approaching things from the standpoint of you don't have to change your behavior. You just have to change what the dog is doing is incorrect. Because again, all of these, the relationship problem, right? That's already there, because like you said, people hire dog trainers 9 out of 10 times because there's already a behavior or already a relationship problem between the dog and the human, right? I completely agree with you with that. But it was created somewhere. It was created by, use the parent example, being too permissive over things, by responding to the dog's discipline and cues that they're putting on you, which puts the dog in a position of power over the owner, right? Like all of this, it was all created, right, somewhere. And as trainers, if we're going to do a good job, we have to look at how it was created in the first place. We got to make sure we stop the bleeding by making sure that all of those problems have been resolved. We get the owner to view how what they were doing was incorrect and leading up to all of this stuff happening in the first place. Then we focus on what we need to do from a training standpoint on the dog in order to shift the way that the dog is thinking, right?
Well, it does. It shines a spotlight on the dog owner fully. Like that's the difference here. When I talk about training being intervention, it's just like the parent example. Like you go by the parent example, right? It brings a spotlight on, okay, the role of the parent. You know, that's why this is why some of these trainers out there say, I profiled one force-free trainer, John McGuigan. He's bringing up these disconnected examples too, like Robert Hines, the same thing.
Sure.
Dogs are sentient beings, right? Well, that completely shifts the focus right away from the role of the owner and the way that they influence through the social connection dogs share with us that way, social. And so, I talk about, the spotlight part. Yeah, it's like, but the problem here is what defines a process itself once the relationship problem is underway. Understand that's the crux of it.
Sure, so as far as what I said, right, like using me as the example here, because again, I'll stand behind you as far as like balanced dog trainers that are not focusing on the root of the problem, where the relationship problem was created, what the owner is doing wrong, right? Like those are shit trainers, in my opinion, regardless of what avenue that they're in, because they're never going to achieve long-term success because they're not solving why things got so toxic in the first place.
Well, you're trying to split hairs, David. I mean, balanced dog trainers are in agreement that training is a learning-based exercise. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, but
that's the problem.
But where
that's how you're motivating dogs. You're
right?
You're in agreement to motivate dogs, right? Differently. You're motivating dogs just like motivating a selfish child when they're already selfish, and the way that versus the parent, interacting. When I talk about interacting with, it's like a parent, David, that's invested in terms of change itself, interacting with a child in meaningful ways in their airspace differently. So we talk about even defining, physical force. People talk about punishment, corrections. Mm-hmm. The proper way to define it is how it filters through the owner, right? Relationally, just like a parent who is interacting with a child who's dialed into. I talk about this system of training, the parenting style it represents, the authoritative parenting style. Mm-hmm. Okay, versus balanced dog trainers.
The authoritative parenting style is, just so I'm clear on what you mean by that, that is that you are in a position where you're making sure the child or the dog is compliant to you. Is that generally what that is?
Compliant, but again, understand when I talk about process too, because people look at, when I talk about control and influence, it's a temporary process, okay? Understand that when I talk about mechanisms of structure through, say, using the crate, once a relationship problem is underway, sure. Even the remote collar, the
those are management tools as you're striving towards your end goal.
Well, management, but not just management and never fixing anything. Like the key component here to change is the process, is the core ingredients that talk about influence and control, how they're happening through a interaction-based method, okay, dialed in that way. And so everything starts to the issue about, freedom, dog gaining more freedom, because there has to be an intersect point once a relationship problem is underway, mm-hmm. The intersect point, the process itself has to intersect at that point in time, right? It's like getting the information, like the selfish child example. Okay, I got a relationship problem with my child. Well, what do I do? How's a parent adjust, in that situation, right? They're going to be putting structure in. The child can't go over to their friend's house to play video games. It could be grounded. And again, that has
they're adding structure and consequences. The consequences are to actually shape the behavior, right? The structure is to ensure that you don't you can't let the child go over the friend's house. You apply structure so they can't go over the friend's house because you're not able to monitor and effectively guide their behavior if they're not in direction. That's why we use crates and things like that, is because I can't have my dog just free in the house 24/7 if I'm having behavioral issues, because I'm not going to be able to be as on top of the dog as I need to be for that entire time. I have a life, right? Like I do other things. So I use things like crates, or in my case, I use things like obedience commands, right? In order to manage the dog. Let's just take an obedience command like the place command or a downstay or something like that. The downstay or the place command is not there to solve the problem, right? The downstay or the place command is there to help manage the dog as I'm working on all of the things that are happening when they're not in those management techniques, like crates or downstays.
But again, to change the dog's overall decision-making process. This is the thing about
when they're free, we work on changing their decision-making process, and we change their decision-making process by applying discipline for the incorrect choices they're making, so that they stop making those choices, right?
But if it's reactionary, right? If influence, it's like the bonk, right? If it doesn't align, number one, the dog doesn't have clarity. Right? Clarity comes through just like a parent who's interacting in specific ways with the child, who's like that personal type of dynamic, Dave. Like the difference between me talking to someone 20 feet away, say if I had a child that was acting out and me standing 20 feet away from them having a conversation as a parent. I mean, that child can basically dial me out, right? They're all right, but you get closer and closer and closer into that personal space of that child and have that same conversation, takes on different meaning, right? Like you're in a personal space a certain way. It doesn't mean I'm threatening the child, right? It means that dynamic changes, right? So when I talk about when I talk about the role of influence, I talk about that type of interplay with, again, the mind of the dog, okay? This is where you'll see the difference even come out through getting a dog to wait for their food, right? You're saying wait, right? Versus, I see everything I say today, you can put it to the test. Okay, wait for the food, but you can look at the dog's body language. Say that dog's mind is still jumping over.
Yeah.
The dog's sitting there.
Yeah.
Because this goes into some of your videos too.
This is another example I agree with you completely on, right? So with food, I don't use wait commands. I don't stop the dog from taking the food with downstays or sits or anything like that, right? The dog respects the fact that the food is mine until I give it to them, right?
Well, how's that respect gained? But the thing is, meaningful influence, I talk about
right.
Well, it has to, that interpersonal thing I talked about. When you get your hands on the dog and do what I call, like you see me do the push-pull in that moment, right? Okay, that moment of influence happening over again, stinking thinking's happening, because understand when these things are happening with food issues and stuff, typically it's a result of a relationship problem, right? That dog is already not thinking healthy. Things become like a supply source. You'll see, that's why I talk about dogs head pivoting. You pay attention, you see the dog, you know, looking at the cat, looking at the other dog, looking at, so
they really would like to do those things, right? Yeah, they're stinking thinking, right? They are actively in the process of stinking thinking, right?
Well, David, it's the same thing as a selfish child. When the child's really selfish, say they're, and part of that selfishness is about they don't have healthy thinking towards their peers, sharing toys.
Yeah.
Well, they walk into a room, David, right? I mean, they're thinking, you already see their mind going towards, say, maybe video games, right?
Sure.
Because they don't have a healthy attitude about other people, the parent, peers, right? And so that stinking thinking, the parent who's on it is saying, hey, right? It's like engaged. It's like not waiting for things just to start happening. You're in the middle of a relationship problem.
But isn't it normal that as we're working on whatever, dog reactivity, trying to go for their food, the child looking at the video games and really wanting to go over there and be selfish and take the child's video games or whatever it may be, isn't the problem what they do with the thinking, not the thinking itself? I mean, there's plenty of times I, as a human, right, think about things that I probably shouldn't be doing, right? But having the discipline to know that I can't do those things is really what's important. Like, there's not somebody that's constantly like, hey, don't think that. Hey, don't think that. Hey, don't think that.
By your approach from the perspective, you're an adult, right? So for a child, right, the role of the parent, right, for a younger child, I'm talking about a younger child. This is why I use the example of how this connects with dogs and social animals. It's really, really simple. Yeah. Once you take it to an adult level, right, because the parent's role changes from, control to less and less influence over the child as they get older and older, right? The parental role switches.
Yeah.
But as we talk about,
because you're really training when you're going through the training process, you're training a human or you're training a dog ultimately to just make good decisions. Right?
Well, it's not just about response. This is the problem in the dog training world. It's
but don't you want them to just make, if they made good decisions, wouldn't there not be a problem?
Well, you'll see it. You'll see the transition through. Okay, when I talk about a process that brings in those core ingredients the right way, control and influence, right? Through how you're interacting with the dog. Everything starts to change. Now you're going to invest in certain, there's big ticket items such as the dog will have food issues, David, and different things, but how how those ingredients come in through the interaction part of it is what starts to deal with that stinking thinking. The dog, everything filters. Dogs are pack animals, social animals. You're the pivot point. Everything filters through that way. Everything comes through that way. Now, again, the process itself, coming out on the other side of a process, you'll start to see all the behavioral issues diminish, right? You'll start to see it. The dog, it doesn't break the dog's spirit or drive. It's the dog, everything, the focus shifts on to you differently. Because dogs will go one of two ways. They get possessive, they start to attach to people. They're falling around in the bathroom, and the person thinks, oh, the dog loves me more, right? It gets that level of that dynamic going on. But through, again, the right process, it's like rebuilding bridges. The dog starts to perceive the person the right way, right? And everything changes. Connection, depth. I talk about depth of the relationship. Because even this idea of things is so superficial, right? It really is. I mean, this learning-based theory, it's just like pull a treat out. Is that really what it's about? They really think about that.
Yeah, but you keep getting back to the treat, right? I think the thing that at least good balance trainers do is they ensure that regardless of if we have a treat or not, the dog understands that they still have to do the thing we're asking them to do. Or they can, regardless of if we have food or not, they cannot do the thing that we're ultimately telling them not to do.
But you're looking at things trainers look at, it's not just the act that's physical, right? Because really that's the problem. You watch your videos there, you see there's a moment where you're telling and don't get, this isn't meant to be just outright criticism here. This is just me saying, hey, there's a moment in that video where.
Which video you're talking about? Which one?
It's where the dog is.
Was it the leash walking video, or was it the one with the poodle with the reactivity?
It's the reactivity. I did several videos. I know I put out
most of the ones you did were on the same session though, so it was probably the poodle with the reactivity. Got it.
Yeah, but there's a moment in that anyway. It's the same type of
where the dog sits and was still scanning around. Is that the moment?
You're saying get the dog into it. You're saying get the dog into a down.
Sure.
And
I said tried. I wanted to see how she was going to try to do it.
Well, David, the dog's already. That's part of the point. The dog's already investing. Okay, stinking thinking's happened.
Sure. Yeah. So that and that was my critique of that video was that entire minute and 30 seconds you watch. I said at the very beginning was I wanted to see what I didn't care. You've mentioned a few times like we don't need to see the behavioral issue, right? Like I don't care about what the dog is doing in that moment. This is where you get back to like blame shifting. I'm not putting the blame on the dog. I wanted to see what the owner was doing. Right?
But
because that's where the problem lies, is how she's interacting with and communicating with the dog, right?
But David, one of the videos, that's why I did a response, a shorter video you did, you basically said the dog's in a physical response. The dog's physically said, you came around and said, I don't care what the dog's looking at. Yeah. Like basically saying, as long as you got the physical sit, I don't care. Well, you should care because that's the whole point of everything is to say, it's about mind and body. Yeah, it's not just about body, right? Sure, it's like mind and body, depth of relationship.
So let me explain to you how I see this stuff generally play out. And again, I want you to tell me where I'm wrong, right? So initially, I don't care about what the dog is thinking about, right? Hold on, let me finish here, right? I don't care what the dog is thinking about. I care that the dog makes the correct choice, right? It could be reacting on a leash. It could be jumping on people. It could be whatever. It could be any behavioral issue that you want to list, right? I'll just use the reactivity as the example because that's a video we're talking about, right? Initially, if I can get the dog to make the correct choice after they've had years of rehearsing the incorrect choice, things don't just shift from they're making the incorrect choice for years and years. They have a toxic relationship with the owner and frankly with anybody, to they're making the correct choice and there's just absolutely no thought of making that incorrect choice ever again.
But you're at a superficial. It's not just about physical.
Let me finish that thought.
Okay, go ahead. Right? Yeah.
In that particular video, as the video progressed, I don't know if you actually watched the whole thing or you just reacted to the first minute.
I only had to go a minute and 30
okay,
in.
so you didn't watch. But this is the problem, right? So you didn't watch the whole thing, right? So
I didn't have to watch the whole thing.
So you didn't see where it progressed to, which was. That very first one, as soon as we got the dog into the sit, yes, the dog was scanning around like crazy. He definitely still wanted to rehearse the behavior, right? But he was making the correct choice. The next dog, because we passed by, I think, like 10 or 15 dogs in that entire video. Like it was like the nicest freaking day in Cleveland, whatever. So then the next dog, the dog did it, right? And then as the dog was thinking about making that incorrect choice, it chose to make the incorrect choice again. We showed the dog you still can't make the choice. And then as we progressed through the next 7, 8, 9 dogs, each time the dog made the correct choice, the dog's state of mind settled. The dog wasn't scanning as much. The dog was in more of a relaxed state of mind because making the correct choice became more natural for him as he was able to practice it. So explain to me where that thinking.
Sure, you're talking about choice. Choice is at a physical response level, right? It's the same premise I said about what defines a process. Selfish child. Is it just about the child picking up their toys, incentivizing them to do so?
No. But in this case, I wasn't. In this case, I was putting demands on the dog.
Through the remote call, right?
Sure.
Okay.
The enforcement of those demands was through the remote collar, but the remote collar through me still.
What I'm saying, if influence and control, if influence is not brought in the right way, not dealing with the dog's thinking thing, not dialed in the right way, Dave, not at the right level, being proactive, right? The problem is, because balanced dogs are right, you bring the remote collar into the equation, right? So they're bringing influence in, intercepting the dog's state of mind, right, at a certain choice, as you call it. The problem with that, again, if influence is not brought in the right way, this is the reason why often balanced dog trainers can never get the remote collar off that dog.
I disagree with that
right?
completely.
Well, no, listen, it's all over the place.
And I'm talking with me specifically, right? I do think there are many trainers that can't get off.
I'm just saying, I'm saying in general here, David. Okay, I'm just talking. This is a problem.
Sure, I'm still trying to talk about like this specific situation, though, right? Because this really is kind of the crux of it. That's
your interpretation, right? You can say all day long. You say, Dale, this is fantastic, right? I got great change happening. But here's the thing. Here's the problem. Who's in control of actually auditing whether or not a level of change is actually happening the way that you're describing? Who's in control of that, David, in terms of saying that?
The owner.
You are.
No. The owner is.
No. Well, the owner could buy in. Like you said before, the owner will buy into anything, right?
Well, if they've bought into the fact that their relationship with their dog is better, right, and that they could go for walks and it's enjoyable with them, whether we as trainers think it's perfect or not, isn't that kind of irrelevant? Because isn't the actual thing that we get hired for to make our owners' lives better? You disappeared.
Well, balanced dog trainers are playing both sides of the fence here anyway, because what they're doing is,
Dale, did you turn your video off? Your video's gone.
Oh, just a second, Dave. Sorry.
That's all right. Just want to make sure we can
see
your beautiful face.
I hit the space bar and must have triggered it off by accident.
That's all right.
But here's the point, Dave. It's like, balanced dog trainers are playing both sides of the equation or both sides of the fence, because what they do is, they bring influence in. So coming from, say, a force-free, it's a type of spectrum here, Dave. Mm-hmm. So I talk about this spectrum situation in terms of what defines a process, the core ingredients, through an interaction-based method where they're coming in the right way by way of changing. Dogs coming out the other side with a predictable outcome, the way I describe it. And you go further down that spectrum through balanced training, because balanced dog training, they use remote collars. They'll bring in, corrections, right? So influence is part of it, right? So some level of change will happen, Dave. Okay, I never deny that, because here's the point. I'm not saying that change, and I even go so far as talk about the totality of the relationship. We'll probably won't have time to get into it here about the owner themselves beyond just an idea of things. This is where the dogs I personally own. Okay, this is going a little deeper here. Dogs I personally own, but you have to understand this a little twist, because this causes confusion with dog training. Dogs I personally own, David, I could take them up to a really high level of change, even though I've adopted this idea of things that trains a learning-based exercise. So I could use treats. I'll bring up to a high level. I talk about the totality of the relationship beyond just an idea of things. But 40% of the people coming to me for help with their dog, and they're adopting this idea, learning, and they're motivating dogs the way to describe it. And change has to be generated through the core ingredients I talk about. They'll be failing, and they won't even know they're failing, because guess what my focus is on? Response in a very superficial way. Right out of the starting gate, I'm getting dogs to respond. Do you understand? Like, you have to. I get into some of these dynamics in dog training.
I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is two things, because we've shifted the conversation a little bit again here, right? Thing number one was that in the case of that video that I watched with, it is undeniable that by the end of that video, the dog's level of stinking thinking, as you referred to, was dramatically lower than it was at the beginning. And I never needed to actually address the stinking thinking, because I addressed the actual decision that the dog was making, which in my opinion is the important thing.
But the problem here, Dave, if you're not dialed in the way that I describe it in terms of the core ingredients, influence taking hold through the right process itself, the problem with that is you'll be thinking, because you're looking at a physical level with these dogs in a certain way.
Well, I'm looking at you're looking at the emotional, right? And I'm talking about, you're referring to the stinking thinking. I think you used that as the example.
I'm talking about being dialed in, that way.
Dialed into the stinking thinking.
The problem with that, David,
but the stinking thinking improves.
I go back to the same thing with auditing, who actually establishes the level of change that's actually happening with dogs, because you're in control. All these trainers out there, they can blame shift as much as they want. Right? Like, I'm just talking in general. I'm not even focused on you right now. I'm just saying in general, whether force-free trainers, whether it's balanced dog trainers, they can blame dogs all day and get away with it.
I understand what you're saying.
Right?
I completely do. And again, I agree with you at that point, but I'm talking about me specifically right now. And I'm talking about that specific video of the end result was was significantly closer to probably what you would want it to see than the beginning result. You're trying
to get out from underneath all this somehow, David, right now.
What am I trying to get out from? What am I trying to get out from?
I'm half teasing.
No,
you,
no,
Dave,
I understand, but like, no, seriously, like what I'm getting at is like literally, and I know you watched my last podcast, so you know, I saw the owner the next week, and the dog is not reacting at other dogs anymore. So here's the thing: regardless of if the dog is still thinking about it and still thinking, if she can go for walks and that dog isn't reacting anymore, where's the problem?
Well, the problem lies in people get blindsided. I put out some examples of this where dogs will actually push through the remote collar. Here's the example. I had a situation in Canada, David.
Yeah, I heard you talk about this on your
okay,
video you made yesterday. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just putting examples of when people try to counter what I'm saying to say, oh, well, Dale, the dogs are fine. I'm saying, okay, well, the truth really gets revealed. Okay, when you get into dogs with holding a higher level of control, deal with these aggressive dogs, where suddenly you have a situation where the dog is blowing through that remote collar to get to the other side to express control, biting somebody, and then guess what happens? Oh, it's a dog. I don't know what happened. And this goes a situation of taking the remote collar.
That would be bad training, though, right? Like that would be, and when I say bad training, I mean even in the moment, there probably was many things that owner did that was incorrect leading up to that.
Well, no, this is a balance. She went through a balanced dog trainer.
Well, that doesn't mean that it was good. The dog that you reacted to the video went to a balanced dog trainer, did a freaking 30-day boarding training, like 10 lessons, and the dog was still a fucking mess, as you saw. Right. So yeah, again, I agree. There's shitty balanced dog trainers out there.
But Dave, here's the thing. You're trying, like I said, I understand. This is going into this whole issue about why having this conversation, balanced dog trainers are immediately going to be in a defensive posture, right? Because again, going back to the thing I said, this is an ethical issue as individuals. They're saying from the very beginning. I always default back to this. The dog training world's in a mess, David. Look at all the problems happening, breed-specific bans. You get into this divisiveness, these situations with Jeff Gellman. You look at Zach George versus the Dog Daddy. Robert Cabral came out, made that contradictory statement. Science has no place in dog training. That's
and
ridiculous.
I've talked about him before, and I think that, you start getting into some of the trainers like him and some of the other ones, they've played you get into playing both sides of the field, right? I do think that a lot of those trainers are playing both sides of the field from the standpoint of they're using the aversives and they're punishing the dogs and they're doing all the things that they're shitting on all the other trainers for saying, but they're marketing it and branding it as if they're not doing that. Right. So again, I agree with you, right? Like I'm pretty sure that I agree with what you're saying with that.
Well, then why aren't they agree on me that in terms of what the core ingredients of a process is? Here's the thing. You can put everything
because of the results that we're getting.
You're going to, well, as long as you keep defaulting back to a balanced dog trainer's approach based on this idea of things, I talk about the problems with that, then I'm never going to come into agreement with that for the very reasons I state in terms of the problems that I connect the dots, say this is why these problems, it's symptomatic, these problems are inherent to this idea based on its application once a relationship problem is already underway. So I don't motivate dogs, David, to respond that way at all for a reason. Because the core ingredients I talk about, influence and control, have to come in at the right level, the right way to come out on the other side with a predictable outcome. And this will come through, especially when we deal with aggressive dogs. Okay, this is where you get this blindside dogs pushing through the remote collar. Because you can stand here all day long, David, and say, oh, my training, I'm not meant to be critical, but my training, all trainers out there are going to say this. Meanwhile, the dog training world, balanced dog trainers are losing their tools. That's no accident either.
But really, don't you think that, like, do you really think that there is anything balanced dog trainers could do that would make because the force free community is who is pushing against the tool bans, right? I don't think that could really be debated a whole lot, is that people in the force free world are the ones that want tools banned. Can we agree on
ideology,
that?
But balanced dog trainers
but what I'm saying is,
compromised.
Can we agree that the force free community is who wants the tools banned?
That the force free community, yeah.
That they are the ones that want the tools banned. Right?
Oh, 100%.
So what I'm getting at is there anything that the balanced dog training community could do that would make them just look at those tools and be like, you know what, we don't want to ban these tools anymore? Is there anything they can do?
You can reject the idea that training is a learning-based exercise.
So why would that change why would that change their perception of tools?
Because it comes out, well, anyone go watch the video I made this point very clear with the Jamie Penrith going on Good Morning Britain. Where the moment where he's challenged, right? He's trying to debate. They're debating the remote collars being banned over in the UK right now, right? Yeah. Bans are happening worldwide. Jamie Penrith, as a balanced trainer, goes on Good Morning Britain I talked through that whole video. It builds up to that moment, right? Because think about what I'm saying, balanced dog trainers, they're compromised. They're in a catch-22 situation they can't get out of on this issue. So as a conversation between Jamie Penrith and this lady from Dogs Trust develops, there's a moment where he's trying to justify, right? He's saying, well, these collars are good for some dogs, but then it comes down to this issue as a process that balanced dog trainers are in agreement with. This issue about the role of influence, about choices with the dog, about motivating dogs to respond the way that balanced dog trainers do. And the moment that happens is the lady challenges, hold on here a second. We can show that we can get a dog to make a different choice based on using food or whatever, something the dog wants, to make a dog a different choice rather than running out towards, say, sheep. And right there, blown. You know what I'm saying? What's the counter, right? Because balanced dog trainers, they agree that it's about approaching training as a learning-based exercise, motivating dogs to respond this way, changing their focus. I get this issue, changing their focus, redirecting. So when I talk about control manifesting, being expressed, that gets into this issue about interrupting, thinking, interrupting the role of influence, very specific, right? This is why it's incredible. I don't get any pushback on what I'm saying through force-free trainers. All of it's coming through balanced dog trainers. That's interesting. But that moment on that video shows that you're done. Because, yeah, they're saying, well, hold on here a second. How do you justify the role of influence by way of this superficial idea that trains a learning-based exercise? Balanced dog trainers, they're all over the place when it comes to the role of influence, Dave. Like, that's the problem here. Because force-free trainers look a lot more clear in this idea. It's an ideology is what it is, because, you know, the role of influence doesn't fit that way in this process. You have to apply critical thinking here to understand why balanced dog trainers are losing the war.
Yeah,
I mean, I agree with you that
pitch me the argument though that would convince the force-free community to stop pushing against the e-collars.
They won't, because you know why? This is
exactly system. This is what I'm saying. But they won't. But because, right? There's nothing we could do that's going to stop the e-collar bans.
A little plug. I'm about to release a book, okay?
Sure.
Called Dog Training Wars. It gets into the ideology part of this without naming any names. I don't name names in the book, okay?
Sure.
I just talk about the belief system part of this. Based on what this belief system represents, David, balanced dog trainers don't fit in it that way. They're compromised, okay? Because it's based on what decides. So it has to reach its ultimate fulfillment. And if you look at the perfect storm with society, the permissive parenting on the increase, it plays. If you really, after this talk today, you really sit down and think about what I'm saying, you start to understand why it's impossible for balanced dog trainers to win the war, the ideological war, based on the fact that they're in agreement. Okay, they're in agreement with this idea itself that doesn't line up.
Yeah, but
okay,
what I'm asking is how, forget balance trainers for a minute, how do you, Dale McCluskey, win the war then? Because you're saying like, oh, balanced dog trainers because...
Dave, I'll be honest here.
Yeah, but let's say there was freaking 10 million of you out there, right, training dogs in the world, right? You're claiming the problem is because of the ideologies that we have as balanced dog trainers, we could never win the war, right, against e-collar bans or prong collar bans.
Not as a balanced dog trainer.
So that's why I'm saying, how do you win the war then? Because you're not obviously you obviously do not subscribe to the balanced dog training label. So how do you win that war?
I'll be completely transparent and honest with you, David. I'm not going to win the war, but I'm probably not. Okay, this is going to get really bad. Okay, I'm being really honest with you.
I agree.
This is going to get really bad. Like it's getting to a level now, David, where that's why Zach George keeps making these statements about legislation.
Sure.
Notice how he's playing off a certain situation. But here's the problem. Balanced dog trainers do the same thing. They're trying to leverage.
Sure.
You know, but I'm talking about talking about the big picture now, right? Because balanced dog trainers are very focused on this, right. That's not good. Because if you want to win the war, if you want to stop what's coming, okay, you have to confront the real issue.
Yeah, but you you just said you can't, right? You said you can't win the war, right?
I hope to. Like David, I always have hope.
Yeah, I appreciate that, obviously. But you're saying you can't win the war, but you're saying the reason why we're not winning the war is because of our ideology. So it feels like you're just kind of using that as a point to continue driving the nail into balanced dog trainers, is what it feels like.
No, because you go through my series, David. I'm balanced in a good way. I'm balanced. I talk about the real problem. I'm not tribal, right? I don't identify as a balanced trainer, a force-free trainer.
Sure.
In fact, my series alternates between both groups, right?
Sure.
Like I don't. So the complaint from balanced dog, oh, Dale's picking on balanced dog trainers, or I don't even hover the goal of this series, because you mentioned this, so I want to address that, because you say, well, you're not sure if that's the right way to address anything. Well, looking at what's happening in the dog training world, there's no real good way to address at this level, right? Other than me I'm going to call it out, because here's the thing: is the whole thing's going to be, if the Titanic's going down, then I'm absolutely going to talk about it. And that's it. I mean, balanced dog trainers. I'm at a point now where the message I'm putting out is going to go on deaf ears for the most part, because.
Why do you think that's the case, though? Right? Because good messages resonate.
Well, there's a trade. Oh yeah, well, David, I agree, but there has to be a trade-off. Think what I'm saying. Like for you, because I'm saying that the process is not a learning-based exercise. Here's the inherent problems when you do it that way, based again on this counterfeit pitch or at a response level, right? So, but there's no wiggle room. So what I'm saying is, no, training is actually a intervention following the path of a intentional interaction-based method.
Sure. And
not like the dog.
What does
what
does that mean to you? What you just said, put that in explain exactly what that means to you.
Well, how the frame
this up. It's an intervention based on would you say, a conscious interactive approach or something like that?
Yeah, how do you want to frame that up? Because I know it's challenging for anyone looking at my stuff to reconcile what I'm doing.
Well, it's a terminology that you're using that I think, same with you say a lot, what defines a process? People don't understand what defines a process, but what does what defines a process mean to you?
It's a power play, Dave. When you bring the core ingredients in, control, intentional control and influence, right? Based again on the dog's stinking thinking, as I call it, relationship problem already happening. Just like, a power play situation when a parent is going in, engaged, and getting the child's airspace differently, the selfish child, and the selfish child doesn't like it.
Sure.
Right? There's going to be some pushback.
You're putting demands on them. They're going to push back against
demands,
it. And the pushback generally is a lot of the problem, right?
It's like but the pushback itself is part of the changing part of it.
Of course.
So when I talk about dogs, like when you see me interacting with dogs, I talk about dogs as understanding the intent. Like I'm interacting the same way pretty much all the time, like different ways, but it's a type of language, as I call it. Like I don't even use commands, David, until 12 days into a 14-day process. That'll blow people's minds, because I understand about. It doesn't blow. Well, hey, listen, Dave, I'm not. Listen, you could really maybe figure out a lot what I'm saying here today, perhaps, and really consider it. But here's the thing. Yeah, so perception of dogs change, then you start the commands take on different meaning, verbal, right? Because perception changes the dog towards the owner the right way. And then the interaction part of it, that diminishes. Understand that it's not like it will look very tyrannical, though. Understand that when you see me interacting with dogs, right, it'll look tyrannical in some ways to someone looking on, right, that is kind of tied into this idea of things, saying, well, why doesn't Dale use treats? That's a common objection. Why is he motivating dogs to respond that way? Because I understand the issues, the problems with that.
You want to make sure that the dog is being compliant to you.
That's right.
Not working just David, for some sort of reward.
But the core ingredients have to be in the process, right? I keep bringing that up because that's important. It's like a demand on a child.
What are the core ingredients?
Influence and control.
So when you say influence and control, break that down for me. Do you mean how you are applying said pressure or consequences or whatever?
Control, intentional control through the leash. So this is why dogs will kick up.
Yep.
Right? When you have a dog on the leash, sure. That's a point of connection.
Yes.
Control, like one of the videos you had, the dog was like, what? Like you didn't really dial in that way. The dog's out in front of the leash, right?
Sure.
So all I'm talking about is that element, that aspect has to be there. It's intentional control through the leash will start to, right away. That's why you get a dog right beside, off leash, David. Freedom, free will, right? The dog is already in control, moving around for treats. One would assume that, oh, well, that's great. You trust that. But really, it's the same basis. Sure. Without demand on that dog, without controlling that dog, David, yes. Nothing's revealed.
Which I agree.
This is why dogs can hold an incredible amount of control in the home environment.
Sure.
right? Just like I talk about selfish child can look great most of the day as they're playing their video games, but ask yourself the question: when do the moments of revelation happen to the parent,
Yeah.
right, to reveal the bad attitude of the child?
Yes.
Right. Take the garbage out. Because,
I'm with
right,
you.
right. I mean, some of the stuff you just have to connect some dots here, but that's why intentional control through the leash, right? So it can be on leash, even without a leash, right? Your arm can be a point of connection through control, right? Leash is part of it.
Sure.
And so that process right away, the integrity of control itself through the crate is control, a muzzle's control, all right? So the leash is control, and then influence defined through the interactions themselves, Dave. So the influence part, this is the aspect of just like parental influence, and think of it like interpersonal, personal, right? Getting your hand on the dog. So even when I'm pushing on the dog, it's not about undue force. How I describe the dog coming into agreement with, it's like the tug of war team that collapses. You ever watch the tug of war team, David, that start to buckle? Well, those are the dynamics involved in agreeableness. And then the part of understanding the dog is actually things are changing. You'll see the head of the dog turn inwards towards me or whoever I'm working with, coming into a state of relaxation within those moments, David, as those ingredients are part of the interactions. So everything. This is why when I do a 2-week board and train, you can watch the 2-week board and train, David. I show all of it. I talk through all of it. And so people can understand what's going on, full transparency, what's happening, nothing hidden here. Everyone can put everything I say to the test. But I always default back to, David, the dog training world. All the inherent problems I talk about, if you just line it all up. But here's the challenge, right? If you're already sold out, I'm not saying you are, sold out to this idea, it's very difficult, right, to kind of break free from this ideology because it requires a trade-off. Your messaging is going to be different. You're not going to be so popular, right? Because you're shining a light on the dog owner differently, Dave.
Yeah. I'm still okay. So let's look at it this way, right? So you said control and influence, right? You said your first, what did you say? You don't give a command for 12 days or something like that. Is that what you said somewhere around there?
Once the perception of dogs change.
Right. So basically equating that to what balanced dog trainers do, so you're asking them to be in agreement to the physical pressure that you're putting on them, right? You're using a choke chain. I've seen in most of your videos, obviously, right? You're applying physical pressure onto the dog in order to, and I know it's not about the sit or about the down or about the come command or any of those things, but you're using getting them into these physical positions to facilitate them being in agreement to the pressure that you're putting on them.
It's not about pressure, but here's the missing ingredient.
But it is pressure, right? You're using negative reinforcement.
Here's the difference between you and I. I'm dialed into the dog's state of mind.
Yeah. But in that case, you're using negative reinforcement. You're using pressure in order to get the dog to get. You want them to give way.
Control. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Step
intentional control.
Right, but it's negative reinforcement. Right.
You can call it whatever you want. Negative reinforcement. It's not working. Like the whole thing about the mindset of how you're trained, how you're engaging. So when you use, like, say, negative reinforcement, you're alluding to this learning theory idea.
Yeah, but you're using negative reinforcement, right? And you're asking the dog to give way to the pressure that you're putting on them. So why is that different than me doing leash pressure on a pinch collar? Right?
Because
in our first week of our board and train, generally we're not giving commands. We're teaching the dog to become agreeant to the leash pressure, right?
Because it's interaction based at the beginning.
Yeah, but I'm interacting with the dog through the leash.
Not the way, it's not bringing in the right way, right level.
How am I bringing it not in the right way?
And not dialed in the right way.
How?
It's not. It can't. It's impossible.
But explain
because you're motivating. Well, because influence is reactionary. You look at the physical. A lot of times, balanced dog trainers, they just want the physical manifestation of a response, right? You see this all the time in the videos when balanced dog trainers, not just yourself, are standing there, right, dealing with a relationship problem with the dog. They're standing there talking. You watch the Larry Crone video.
Yeah. And they're not stepping right in. I know that was your critique of the first video that I made. Yeah. The leash walking video was, you said in the first minute as I was talking to the camera, the dog was at the end of the leash and pulling around and stuff, and you said you should
the dog's head's pivoting. Well,
right on
'cause
them
you're in the
right
middle
away, right?
you're in the middle of a relationship problem. Why wouldn't you be dialed in? Why wouldn't you make the
Yeah.
connection between mind and body, Dave?
Yep. So let me push back on
Like
that, because
that's
that's one of
absent
your
in balanced dog training.
yeah.
That's totally
So
absent.
listen, right? So one of your critiques that I've seen you make towards myself and towards others is that at the beginning of a lot of the videos, we're talking and we're not dialed into the relation, right? We're not dialed into the relationship. We're not communicating with the dog right away, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So there's a couple reasons why I think that we do that, and I think that they're all very fair reasons, right? So thing number one, right? In the case of most of those videos, it's the first time we met those dogs. Those dogs have been having a relationship problem with people for the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, right? And right off the rip, before I actually start working with the dog, I want to explain the process of what I'm going to do. This is when we're making content, right? If I take a dog out of a crate right away, that's in my board and train kennel, immediately I'm communicating with them, right? I'm not waiting and having a conversation before it. I'm communicating with them right away. But for the sake of making content, I'm going to explain to the people that I want to watch the video exactly what I'm going to do and exactly why it's going to alter the relationship that I ultimately have with the dog, right? And the reason why I don't see that as problematic is if the dog has been rehearsing having toxic relationships with people for the last 1 to 7 years, what's another minute and 30 seconds of them rehearsing it before I start communicating?
I'll tell you why that's significant, because that's why I stopped. You talk about why I only did a minute and 30, why that was a problem to me, is because it's just like a parent-child relationship. It's the moment of contact. So once you're dialed into what, in terms of depth of relationship, the relationship itself, the dog's state of mind, control manifesting, right? Immediately, when you walk in, right, the whole theme of everything is to shine the spotlight onto, interrupt those states of mind right away. Okay, here's the example. It'd be like me, in terms of parenting example, walking in to a selfish child situation and telling the parent, yeah, show me. Let's have John. I know Johnny is a brat and he's has a major problem with video games. Let's let him get on the video games for 5 minutes. I want to see him explode, and then we'll deal with it. Just like you have to think about that.
Yeah, but you're looking at it from the wrong lens of you're looking at it from the standpoint of we want to see the dog's problematic behavior as opposed to I want to see how the owner is currently handling those situations.
Because you're focused at a physical level, not
I'm focused on the owner. I'm not even focused on the dog.
No, love it, David. You watch the videos. Why it's physical to sit. That's why the dog is in a sit position. Dog controls manifesting. You're telling the owner to put the dog into a down. The dog's not having it. There's all sorts of examples of that with not just yourself.
Yes, because I wanted to see how the owner was going to do it. Right?
Yeah. So you asked me a question, Dale. Why would it's like, oh, show me? No, it's about change. If your dog, it's like being fully embracing.
Don't you need to know what they're doing incorrect in order to show them how to?
No, it's about dialing them in. Say this is what your role is. This is the role. These are the core ingredients coming online right now.
Yeah.
You understand? There's no way because that's fulfillment to the dog. You understand that? You want
but they've been getting fulfilled for the last 7 years.
So it doesn't matter.
What's another minute?
Don't make excuses for it, David.
What's another? No, seriously.
Right
but in order to really connect with an owner and get them to understand what, like you said, not the blame on the dog, but the blame on them and what they're doing incorrect, I need to be able to clearly articulate to them all of the things that they are doing incorrect. And in a lot of cases,
why, like David, that's why I sit down with dog owners before I even do hands-on. The dog's in the crate.
Yeah. But you haven't seen them rehearse the behavior.
That's why I sit down with the dog owner first, just me and them, David, without engaging the dog first. Because when I engage that dog, immediately, I want them thinking the right way. I want those core ingredients online. Change is happening. If you watch the Larry Crone video, and just watch that video where he's at a seminar.
I know which one you're talking about.
He's over there talking to the audience. But I'm just saying these are your fellow balanced dog trainers here I'm talking. So he's over there talking to the lady, right? And we talk about finding the working level of and this plays into this issue about finding the working level of a remote collar. The dog is lunging forward, controls manifesting. It's going on for minutes, and then suddenly you start pushing that button. Well, guess what? You got to juice that collar up to like a lot because it's not proactive. It's not intercepting at the level where control is already manifesting. You're dealing with a relationship problem. That's an aggressive dog, right? And so it's about, and that's the same example, because guess what I would be doing different? Because this is what you're asking. I'd be over there with that dog owner before she even came out of that half door to start to nudge that dog, to start to change the focus of that dog the right way, influence, being proactive. That changes everything, right? But you ask this question as to, okay, why, Dale, why would this be a problem? Well, it's a problem at many levels, because if those core ingredients are not brought into the process, is not coming online. This is why you got all these inherent problems in the dog training world. Dogs being blame shifted. Remote collars can't get these devices off the dog. All these excuses these trainers are making. Meanwhile, they sell this because guess what? It plays into people's emotions. You get the pet all over your dog. How great is that? It's totally corrupted based on this idea. And meanwhile, again, balanced dog trainers, this is where you talk about the big picture now, where this is all headed. Losing your tools. Force-free movement taking over, right?
Yeah,
and then you're sitting back saying, well, life is...
But Dale, no, you're saying that in a way as if we did something different, that wouldn't happen. And you already said multiple times that there's nothing that anybody could do that's going to stop that from happening. So you're using that as ammunition right now, but it's ammunition when there's no alternative.
I'm just being real with it.
Yeah, but that's not being real when you're saying what you're doing right now is the reason why this is happening, but there's nothing else that you could do that's going to stop it from happening. How is that being real?
No, because you're sitting here defending balanced dog training. I'm defending
the way no. And this is where you keep going back to like my peers, like Larry Crone. Like I've got 2 videos you could watch of all of my issues with the things that Larry Crone does, right? Like I've got issues with Larry Crone as well.
But does it confront
I'm talking about
the way
myself.
I confront it? I know that, but does it actually call out the real issue the way I'm doing, David?
Well, it depends what the real issue is.
Well, the training is not a learning-based exercise.
Yes,
it follows a path of the intervention. That those core ingredients have to be there the way that they're there. So it changes everything.
So
it calls it out.
Okay, so
because you're probably like, Dale, I use clicker train. Like these are all these trainers saying, oh, we're like everything to everybody, right? Playing all sides of the fence here, and then you're wondering why you're losing the war on your tools. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so. You keep using you wonder why you're losing the tools, right? Is implying that there is a way to not lose the tools.
There is a way. That's right.
What's the way? What's the way to not lose the tools?
It's getting the process right. It's understanding what defines a process. It's reconciling. Say it's not a learning-based exercise.
And that will magically make the tools not be lost.
You can slam down guys like Zach George right away because it's going to provide clarity, not just to the owner and the dog, but clarity to the public, right? As to, okay, this is a process. It's not learning-based exercise.
How do you use the tool in a non-learning-based exercise? How do you use the tool in a way that's a non-learning based, like approaching training as a non-learning based exercise? So, for example, I watched one of your videos where you had a pit bull that was in for a board and train, and the dog had just got there, and the dog was in the kennel, and you had an e-collar on the dog. And again, I don't have an issue with any of this, right? But you had an e-collar on the dog had just got there, and you said you were using the e-collar to intercept the dog's state of mind while he was in the crate. Right. So Absolutely. You're correct. So I think a lot of the issue we have here right now, as far as where we're disagreeing with things, has little to do with what you're talking about, which is how we're approaching the training from the learning-based exercise. And it is more to do at what point do we provide the consequences. And I feel like you use a lot of this terminology like intercept, nudge, interrupt, as opposed, and you say like, I don't do corrections, I nudge or intercept or this or that. Well, those are all corrections. And correction to me, because I like to have clear definitions to things, is you're incorporating positive punishment in order to stop something. In this case, instead of you stopping a physical choice like I would choose to do, you're trying to stop the thought that leads to the choice. Right? So it feels like to me the only debate here, which this one, this is really what I wanted to get to, is not debate which one's better, but is that you want to be more proactive and you want to correct the thought leading to the choice, where I say that the thought is irrelevant. It's the actual choice that matters. And as they learn to make the correct choice, the thinking shifts to meet that. Well,
you're in a catch-22 there because, again, through force-free training, right, it's all about choices that way. Right, it's all about motivating dogs to respond that way. So you're in a trap. Because then
Why is that a trap?
Because it calls into question the role of influence. Well, how's it defined through that process itself? All right, because the same thing happened with Jamie Penrith going on Good Morning Britain saying, well, you don't need to use these tools that way. It's about choices that way. It's about motivating dogs to respond that way, right?
Sure. Okay. Let me clarify. I get where you're going with this.
I don't know if you understand that or not.
No. I understand where you're going with this. So to clarify, what I care about is that the dog understands that they have to make the correct choice, regardless of if they want to or not. Which is where that would go against. So what I care. So to clarify, right? It's not just the choice. It's the fact that the dog understands that they have to make that choice regardless of if they want to or not.
That's right.
So did we just come to, so that is my approach to training, is that the dog understands that whatever it is that I need for them to do, right, that they have to do that thing, whether they want to do that thing or not.
No, but the problem is the core ingredients I talked about, influence and control, are not coming in at the right way.
But help me understand the difference. So the difference right now, like I said, is you choose to proactively correct the thought of making the choice. I choose to correct for simply making the incorrect choice. That feels to me like the only dilemma that we're having right now that we can't agree on.
It's about being dialed in. No, it's about the core ingredients I talk. No, it's about your approach is a learning-based exercise, right?
No. It's about. This is where I'm asking
choices,
you to clarify.
It's about motivating dogs.
What's wrong with that?
It's about how you're.
Yeah, it's about how you're motivating the dog. Yes. Right? And I'm saying that how you're motivating the dog, meaning use the example of somebody coming in with a bag of goodies. Yes, if the dog is making the correct choice only because they want to make the correct choice, that is a problem and does not solve the root of the issue, right?
Well, the problem is at a response level, right? Most trainers will immediately paint the picture of the sit down, come and stay as the main focus.
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about right now. I don't use obedience from that standpoint. I use obedience to manage the dog when they're not doing anything incorrect, but I need them to do something else, or to stop them from making certain decisions before I'm in a position to address that decision. But ultimately, my North Star of dog training, I've said this a gazillion times before, is that I want to micromanage the dog as little as possible with obedience commands because I want them to just make the correct choices. So like, for example, I have, just to give you an example.
Go ahead.
No. To give you an example, right? Like I have 4 dogs, right? All 4 of those dogs, not right now, they're not because my wife just left for work, but generally speaking, if I'm up here doing Zoom calls or whatever it may be, all 4 of those dogs are just hanging out downstairs. I'm in my attic right now, basically, right? They're all hanging out downstairs. They're not in obedience commands. They don't have e-collars on. They're not disrupting everything that's going on or anything like that because they make good choices, right? They don't freak out the window at shit. They don't get into my trash can. They don't try to fight each other. They don't freaking, do all of the things that I don't want them to do. So I don't give a shit what they do as long as they make correct choices. But if I go for a walk, right? If we go off leash, at the park or whatever it may be, I'll use obedience commands in those contexts because they're not doing anything wrong. If they want to go run around a field and pee on shit and sniff things and all that and run around and play with each other, that's fine. But there's times where it's not appropriate for them to do that. And I can't just tell them not to do that. I need to give them some sort of direction through the shape of something that's going to prevent them from doing those things. So if I'm on a trail and my dogs are all off leash and I see a person with another dog coming by, I could pull off to the side, call my dogs over to me, put them into a downstay, allow that person to walk by. And, if they were not in a downstate and they approached that dog, there's nothing inherently wrong about that. They're not doing anything that's like a bad choice, but it's not an appropriate time for them to be doing that. So I need obedience commands in order to do that.
Well, here's the problem. Define, like to reveal the current state of the relationship comes to, again, I talk about the core ingredients. Influence. It's like your litmus test, right? How it lines up to how you're interacting with dogs, the intent of that. So that's going to give you, right, the issue about the agreeableness of a dog based with those core ingredients online, the way that I describe them. That's going to provide revelation. That's going to give you, then you line up the other stuff happening in the relationship. Okay, this is like, again, going back to parent example. Take the garbage out or pick up the toys because you're the parent, right? Those core ingredients, the interpersonal
because you
play
have
of that.
to do it. Yes.
So yeah,
sure. So again, if I ask one of my dogs to do something, I need to know that I could ensure that they're going to do that thing, right? Regardless of if they want to do it or not.
But without that coming together, if you're doing an assessment, if I want to assess the relationship with a dog, right? to line it up, because that's your foundation, Dave. That's like your parental, that's your foundation walking into a situation. That's change. That's how change is generated as well. That's your foundation. If you scatter it out that way, saying, well, choices, Dale, and this dog moving here and there. Well, but again, the dog has freedom, right? The dog's making free will. The dog's making choices, right? And so you can be assuming half wrong. Right. So
what am I assuming wrong about anything that I just described a minute ago, though, which is I make sure that I help them navigate learning to make the correct choices by making sure they understand there's certain choices that are absolutely off limits. And then I have commands in order to manage them in situations where they might not be making bad choices, but I need them to do other things.
So, like I said, the
how's that wrong?
Process. How's that wrong? Well, again, you're basing appearances, right? Dogs responding. This is the same thing with throwing a ball out for one dog that's in a high level of control, relationship problem. Throwing a ball out for one dog chase it, and the same person with a dog that perception changes the right way, throwing a ball out. You'll have the same issue of chasing the ball. One may not bring it back quite right to you, right? It's like, trophying that ball. The other one might bring it right back. But the whole issue here.
Yeah, but do you think that a dog just naturally bringing a ball back, or a dog wanting to parade around with a ball, if you haven't actively asked them to bring it back to you, is inherently a bad thing?
No, it's about connecting dots, David, as to actually what defines but
that specific example you used the example of two people throwing a ball, one that has good influence and control over the dog, one that doesn't, and the one that doesn't, the dog parades around with it, the other brings it right back. But what I'm saying is the dog bringing a ball right back really a sign of, if you haven't asked them to bring it back, is that really a sign of you having really, really good control over that? That's a learning, getting back to things being learning based. You have to teach that. You have to have
the core ingredients on, like the dog coming back, right? Once the dog comes back, as soon as you get a hold of that dog, bring the dog under demand, bring that dog to your side, then you'll see it. Yeah, you'll see that on display right at that moment.
But you're bringing them back to your side. You're asking them to be in agreement of something you're asking. The difference is you maybe are not giving a verbal command in that moment, but like cues are not just verbal things, right? Your cue in a lot of cases is your body language and how you shift the dog back into you, or you using your choke chain to pull the dog back into you, or you using physical pressure with your hand, right? Like those are all examples of cues, which gets to like, you're still teaching shit, Dale. Like you're still teaching the dog.
Not about teaching it. No, it's about Dave. It's about the core ingredients.
Yeah. But you're
coming
teaching
in the right way
them
to
in a
process.
Specific way.
Right,
and you're making sure the dog is in agreement.
You just have to, Dave. You just have to look at outcomes here.
Yeah.
The amount of dogs being blame shifting because it all operates off of like this whole issue about the free will of a dog.
Sure.
Right. The initial jumping in point to a relationship problem. Right. In terms of those core ingredients I talk about, influence and control, coming in the right level.
So we have to look at outcome,
through,
meaning we got to make sure that what we're doing works, right? Is that what you're implying by outcome?
I say never being able to get remote collars off dogs being blamed because the relationship hasn't actually gotten any better. And meanwhile, trainers are saying, well, it looked great, right? Because, we're getting these dogs a great sit, a great down, a great stay. Those things are all part of this issue.
I'm not saying sit down or stay. I just said my North Star was not using the commands and making sure the dog just makes correct choices. And I said I use the obedience commands to manage the dog in situations where they wouldn't be making incorrect choices, but I need for them to do something else.
But David, is it just about a child just picking up their toy, like just really superficial? Like you can get into this too. I'm talking about depth of relationship here.
Well,
it's just about choice.
Isn't it Isn't it really as simple as that? Like if your child is compliant to you with minimal, they're in agreement to what you're asking them to do, where's the issue? Right? If they don't make bad choices, but if they don't make bad choices, right? They never rehearse the unwanted things, not because you're bribing them, but because they understand there's certain things there's consequences for, right? And then there are certain things that as they make those correct choices, right, and they live their life and don't experience those consequences, we have a healthy, happy relationship, right? Isn't that kind of the root of any good relationship? Is that they like, whether it's two humans, two dogs, a dog and a human, whatever it may be, isn't it that there's rules and boundaries that are understood, right?
There's
certain things that are off limit. And then as long as everybody is in agreement to those rules and boundaries, and that there's no constant conflict because I'm not needing to constantly nag over these boundaries, that everybody has a good relationship.
David, the revelation part, I talk about the indicators that you get a relationship problem in the first place, right? It's going to manifest, right? It's going to be, you'll see it through the dog not wanting to be walked on the leash a certain way. You'll see a dog get possessive of food, right? You get all those type of indicators that you're experiencing a relationship problem, right? Yeah.
So I want them to come into agreement that there's a certain way you need to walk on a leash, right? And I don't want to have to keep nagging you over it, but there is a certain expectation and boundary here that you have to follow.
But you keep defaulting this as nagging, right? You brought this up before about how you see the role of influence.
Here's why I use nagging. Here's why I use nagging. Right? I'm not even referring to like what you're doing or anything like that, but I see in a lot of cases people that go for walks, right, with their dogs, and this is, you know, the trainers that have been or owners that have been to like say like a bad balance trainer, or like a trainer that didn't do a good enough job of educating the owner on things, right? And they don't know how to use the tool, right? They're never using the tool in a way where they don't need to use it. So you get back to like you can't get the e-collars off. I agree that that's a problem to an extent, right? I agree that it's a problem to an extent from the standpoint of I find a lot of people have to have the e-collar on all the time because they need to actually use the e-collar all the time, right? They need to constantly be hitting that button in order to get the dog to be compliant to them. No different than I see a lot of people can't get off of a freaking leash ever because they're needing to constantly be communicating with the dog through the leash. Right? So I agree that that's a problem, right? So when I look at nagging, I generally look at either inconsistent criteria as far as where you're giving the influence or the nudging or the corrections or whatever it may be, where the dog never understands how to avoid that boundary or that consequence, right? That's it. Or they're using it at not proper intensities. I'm sure you obviously know, let's just use your example of like your push-pull when you're getting a dog into a physical sit position or whatever it may be. It's going to vary how much pressure you need to use on your push-pull to get the dog to come into agreement with it, right? And if you're
not overly forceful. I mean, the thing is, it's about
but still, the pressure needs to change, right? Like there are certain times where they could be very agreeable, and you could use minimal pressure to get them into it, and there are certain times when they're really pushing back on you where you have to use quite a bit more pressure, right? Because that's the rules of negative reinforcement.
No, you wouldn't. The whole intent here is about intent too, right? It's about the dog coming into agreement, not triggering off conflict with the dog.
Sure.
Okay, that way.
Yeah.
So
by using an appropriate amount of pressure.
In 30 years, I've only been bitten one time.
Sure.
Okay, it wasn't even dog's handling. So, but bribery-based dog trainers can make that claim too and never change the dog. So, but the point is, the pressure, we talk about pressure, it's what I call kinetic, okay? It means that when I'm pushing on a dog, bringing a dog under control, intentional control and influence, right? It's like a couple being dialed in, right? It's like knowing, right, how much to push. If you try to get overly forceful with the dog and you get into this type of situation where dog's gonna go into high challenge, well, you don't want that to happen.
Sure.
So
it's the appropriate amount of force. It needs to vary. Is all I'm getting at is that amount of pressure needs to vary, right? There's times it's more. There's times it's less, and finding the right amount of pressure in order to get the dog to come into agreement with whatever pressure you're applying is important. And that's why I'm saying with the e-collar, a lot of the issues I see is that people don't know how to adjust the intensity with it in order to get the dog to come into agreement with it. And on top of that, there's no clarity because it's happening at different times and the dog can't understand how to avoid it.
Here's one of the problems today. When you talk about pressure, you're just thinking about the sit at a physical level.
I'm talking about whatever it is you're trying to get the dog to do. Stop thinking about that thing over there, right? To stop thinking about that dog over there.
No, Dave, there's a difference here because it's about those core ingredients. It's about the interaction itself, all right? The issue about control and influence.
And the amount of pressure we're using plays into the interaction itself. It's a part of the interaction itself.
That's right. It's brought in that way through the interaction, right? And so, but you might talk about moving forward, this issue about being dialed in, the dog's stake and thinking, again, aware you're in the middle of a relationship problem, and you'll see it translate to it. So I talk about supply source, how a dog's mind is moving. You see the head's pivoting. That's a problem. You have to.
Yeah, we talked about that already, though. And we already talked about the fact that because you didn't watch my entire video, you didn't see that the stinking thinking went away by the end of it. Right.
But the problem is you're still at a physical level. If you're dialed in the right way,
but if the stinking thinking went away, that's not the physical. The stinking thinking is not the physical level.
But then my question is, if again, I talk about what the core ingredients are, how does that in terms of dog control manifesting, being expressed, fulfillment. You see how even in that video there, the dog yelping, right? When you're using that prong collar on the dog, right? That plays in this Jeff Gelman situation, very similar. You let control manifest. It's that contrast, David. So an example, people can watch that video. That's why I made a comment about that. When you did use the prong collar, the dog expressed a state of, disagreeableness, right? Because
yelping is not always a state of disagreeableness. Come on, dogs yelp because they're startled. David, dogs yelp because of physical discomfort, right?
Making sense.
I could have corrected at that same intensity, and the dog could have been sitting calm as could be, and it would have yelped.
David, this goes into my point, though, of the Jeff Gelman situation. It's very similar in the way that dog had a startled reaction, but making sense. Making sense comes through the theme of being proactive, right? Dealing with the stinking thinking, lining up that way. Here, balanced dog.
But it doesn't have to. You're saying that if the dog wasn't expressing control, it wouldn't have yelped.
You're dialed in totally different.
But what you're saying, I'm pushing back on these individual things you're saying, because you're saying that if the dog wasn't expressing control, it wouldn't have yelped. Right? If I didn't wait for the dog to express control before I corrected it,
what I'm saying is, if you're dialed in, if influence was proactive, the dog was on the leash in an intentional way, you're nudging, you're dialed in, that dog wouldn't have been yelping.
Because the intensity of the correction would have been lower, and it would not have been so physically uncomfortable or startling that they wouldn't have yelped.
But here's the point: by interrupting the dog's state of mind,
can we say that's the same thing as a correction? Your interception and your nudging, it's a correction.
No, a correction alludes to the balanced dog trainer as being reactionary. They typically will wait.
You could correct proactively. Why can't you correct proactively? Why can't you apply positive punishment proactively as opposed to reactionarily?
Well, David, you weren't doing it on that video.
No, I agree that I don't do that, right? But what I'm saying is what you're doing is still a correction. That's why I'm saying the disagreement we have here right now is you correcting either proactively for the thought or me correcting, we can call it reactionarily to the actual behavior the dog is exhibiting, right? My debate back to that still stands, that the thought is not the issue, because there are 9,000 things that we as humans, or I'm sure even, I remember when I was a little asshole as a kid, right? There was plenty of things I thought I wanted to do, but I knew I couldn't do.
David, it's context. You're dealing with a relationship problem. That's why the dog's there in the first place.
Because they're making bad choices. It's
mind and body, Dave.
Yes, they're making bad choices. And because they've gotten away with making the bad choices for so long, because the owner has been permissive and the owner has done things to reinforce those bad habits, that's where the relationship problem stops. So if we stop the things the owner is doing, that's creating the problems. We create clear boundaries for the bad choices. We wind up with a happy, healthy dog and relationship. So where's the problem with that? Where's the problem with that?
But again, who's assessing whether the dogs look at all the problems inherent in the dogs? Again, go back.
Let's talk about me. Let's talk about me right now, right?
Well,
where is the problem with how I'm addressing that? You watched 1 minute and 36 seconds of the video.
David, that's why I did the videos in the first place.
You watched 1 minute and 36 seconds of the video, though.
That's all
you didn't show that. No. But you didn't see. You couldn't even tell me if the result was good or not. You couldn't even tell me if the result was good or not. So you're saying, David, who determines if the result is good? I'm saying me, because I worked with the client, right? I saw the results firsthand, and I put the video out there to show what the results were. And what you're saying is the process was wrong.
If you're dialed in the way I describe it, listen, David, just a second. If you're dialed in the way I describe it, you would be engaging at the level I do. I have 3,000 videos. Go watch my videos. You'll see me at the connection point, because it matters. That's the point. It matters, because once a dog is expressing that level, right? That's why that dog yelped on that video. I'm not my point being is,
but you're saying the dog yelped in the video because it was expressing control, which no, the dog yelped in the video because it was an intense correction that I gave the dog, regardless of where that correction was for.
Not dealing with the stinking thinking, control is manifesting, because the other video you admit, I don't care about where the dog's looking. I care about where the dog's looking, based again on the fact that I'm dialed in, because the dog's going to be more agreeable. It makes sense. It's clarity. It's going to make sense that dog, if you're dialed, just like the parent being dialed into a selfish child at the beginning. Once they have all the information, they say, you know what, I'm dealing with a selfish child here. I'm engaged. I'm dialed in. I'm in their airspace. for a period of time. Okay, so because it makes sense to the child. Child may not like it, right? But it's about being dialed in that way. Okay, there is thinking even with a selfish child. It's not just about response the way most trainers just make a response happen. You can trust that response for what it is. Again, my pushback on that is say, well, how are you actually defining that those responses can be trusted without those core ingredients at the very get-go being part of it, as well as the process itself, the whole time, the integrity of that process. You go through, David, if you again, I'll push back on all of it in a good way, because I'm saying this goes into this whole issue why the dog training world is in the state that it's in. People can argue all day long with me, but I keep going back to say, listen, do you even think that who's right and who's wrong? Balanced trainers, force-free trainers. Someone's going to be right and wrong here, Dave.
You can't argue that big picture when all balance. And again, I agree this is a problem that a lot of balanced dog trainers disagree and view things differently. I agree that's a problem. But the way of going about solving that is not saying balanced dog training as a whole sucks, right? Because there are plenty of balanced dog trainers out there that are doing things in an appropriate way and are getting good results, right? And that's why I'm trying to push this back to me, and you explain to me the things
they're playing. They want to play the victim card here too, right? They're playing off of the force-free side of things, right? It's like saying,
Dale, why would we be so successful from the standpoint of having happy clients, right? If everything you're saying is true and that we're not actually getting results.
Well, what I'm saying, David, is
help me understand that though, right? We've got, I think, 267, we have a perfect 5-star rating on Google, like 267 reviews, and that's only with like 5 years being in business, right? As Miracle Canine Training specifically. Why would we be held at such a high regard from our clients? Forget the internet, forget followers and all that shit, because that doesn't matter. I agree with you. But from our client standpoint, why would our clients be so thrilled with the results they're getting from us if everything you're saying is true, that everything we're doing is not actually solving problems?
David, what I'm saying, let's be clear. I've never ever said that change or influence, because it's part of balanced dog training. So this change will and can happen, right, through balanced training by way of, I call it the 4 quadrants. So influence is coming into that idea of things, right, at a certain level. So, and then you add on to that the totality of the relationship. I get into that. We didn't talk much about this, but that plays a part too. The level, the dog's social need level. Just like some kids need a stronger parent. So you get into, every dog has a type of need. The social need level will be higher with some dogs, right? So those things play a factor in this. But here's the thing. I talk about the inherent problem of this idea. You look at the collateral damage of this idea through the blame shifting, breed-specific bans, trainers caught up in all these controversies, such as Gelman. I didn't even name, I don't name one. There's like a dozen. You see all of the dog training worlds in the state that it's in. Balanced dog trainers are almost like
so much of that has to do with the bans that are coming this way, obviously, which we, again, just talked about multiple times, that nothing we could do is going to stop it. But some trainers think that if they try to nice things over or portray things in a different way through media and stuff like that, that they're going to win the fight, which I agree with you that that's not the case. That's not the way of approaching this. Being honest about how we're using the tools and being honest about the purpose of the tools.
You stop it by bringing clarity into a process. Get the process right. Okay, that's how you stop it. You're not going to stop it as a balanced dog trainer. So people can go on, because what's coming next, okay, you see it, legislation. You see it happen in the UK. You're going to see it happen in Canada. If you want to be a dog trainer, you got to sign over fully to the force-free side. That's coming, Dave.
Yeah,
okay?
Sure.
So,
and it's a mess, and it's awful. But there's nothing we could do to stop that if it's actually coming. I said how you stop is actually provide clarity through what a process is, by way of role of influence. You're like, as a balanced dog, I keep coming back to this. It's very difficult to have a conversation with a balanced dog trainer who's already convinced himself, in spite of all the problems in the dog training world, just look around, convince himself that, you know what, life is good. We got lots of followers here. My clients are all saying how happy they are. Meanwhile, right, I'm saying, no, there's inherent problems here. You see them all over the place. And then, you're in a defensive lockdown mode, right? Saying, not you, but just saying in general, right? Of not wanting to confront the real issue in the dog training world. I talk about it because it doesn't even make sense that how can force-free trainers and balanced dog trainers both be right? Like both these groups are even calling themselves dog training experts. They got it labeled all over their social media. Well, that doesn't even make sense, Dave. I get what you're saying. I want to try to find somewhere we can kind of agree here on this, right? So like you were saying, you just said a second ago, you weren't talking about me with what you were just talking about a second ago. So if you're not talking about me, what is it that, hold on, let me figure out a way to ask this question.
Well, my flipping the script series, David, I'll get into that for a second.
Sure.
It's not my intent, and that's why I pulled it down at times. Like I have put up, like every once in a while I'll raise my voice. The dog training world is in such a mess. Okay.
Sure.
So I'll go through that series, right, wrong, or indifferent, right? Information focus. If you watch the videos, I'm not getting personal with any of these trainers. I'm going under fair usage. That's why even my whole thing with Ivan Bellinol, right? That kind of irked me a little bit, because it's like saying, well, I'm talking about the real issue. In fact, his video that he put up, the one I commented on, was him putting up a video talking about what's the problem with force-free dog training.
Sure.
He invited people to comment under his social media post. So I commented by way of a video, part of my series. Didn't like it, because part of what Ivan was, I was just dovetailing over to drive-based dog training as well. Okay, so I'm going through. So my flipping the script series. My intent with that series is to go through all the different aspects of balance, force-free, David. But there's an end point there too, just like anything. And sometimes I pulled it down because I don't want to deal with this. Let's let the dog training world come apart at the seams. Things have to get really bad here, obviously, till people start paying attention, because it's so bad. Both these groups, balance and force-free, are tied into this very problematic idea that they're just, but it's like a slow boil, David. You see things escalating. People will say, well, why is it getting so bad right now? Well, because once you understand it's like having a rooftop view. I made these predictions a long time ago about where this is all going. I was laughed at by a lot of balanced dog trainers about device bans coming.
I think a lot of people thought that they were.
Well, but people have a very narrow view, David. They're looking through a certain lens here, the lens of. But I'm saying again, going back to at the very beginning, years ago, David, I said if there's something wrong here, because I always come back to this thing about ethics and about empathy for dogs. And I'll confront you with this too. If there's something seriously wrong here in the dog training world, if there's major problems here, if this isn't lined up, if dogs are getting blamed because something we're doing wrong as a human, everything should stop. And we should, until we figure this out, right? Period. Like, not one dog should be taking the hit here. That's not happening. This is being pushed forward. And meanwhile, all these bad things are happening. I'm saying these are no accidents or coincidences. This is all part and parcel of this idea of things.
So I think
I line this all up.
I think I'm figuring out a place where we probably agree a little bit, but I don't know the solution for this. So you mentioned something a second ago. You said, if there's an ethical problem, right, in the dog, we'll say the dog training world, right, that
Sure.
we should pause everything and we should figure out how we solve that problem, right? So you said
That's
that a
right,
second
yeah.
ago. And I would say something I've been very vocal about on the podcast, Josh and I have talked about it all the time, is the fact that there is a huge ethical problem. And it might not be the ethical problem you're thinking, but the ethical problem that there are a lot of dog trainers out there that are taking a lot of money from people to try to give them or pitch them this solution that isn't actually working. And I think that we agree on that, right? And from my standpoint, I see it from the standpoint of owners going from trainer to trainer to trainer. I see it from the standpoint of a lot of and I see this in the balanced dog training world, a lot of balanced dog training selling these board and train programs and then working with the client for 30 minutes when they come pick up the dog and then never seeing them ever again, almost implying that training the dog is the problem. The dog needs to have training and then all of your problems at home, right?
No, I think, listen, look, there's a lot we can agree on, but I have to understand at a certain point, what am I always going to default back to, Dave? I'm going to default back to what I know to, and again, I nothing's hidden. I put it all out there. So, yeah, the dog training world's in
but are those the
thing,
balanced training problems you're referring to? Are those a lot of the balanced dog training problems you're referring to? Is that there's not enough emphasis on the owner? There's people taking a lot of money from people, right, and not providing any sort of results.
It's a process. It's what defines a training process once a relationship problem is underway, Dave. That's what I'm going to go back to, because there's the inherent problems in the dog training world, whether you talk about board and training or whether you talk about people taking money for this and that. It's happening on all sides. Force-free, balance, but then, who's actually talking about the real problem in the dog training world? Who even wants to talk about the real problem in the dog training world if you're not incentivized to do so? Because, life is good. We can sell this product, making lots of money. yeah, like blame shifting has become normalized. It really has.
Yeah, I know.
Because when you have both these groups doing it, David, at the level that's happening, force free more so than balance, right? Blame shifting is happening. Then it's like, it seems so dysfunctional, but it seems normal. Meanwhile, then I get into the big picture stuff, right? So it's like, then what's going to happen here is balanced dog trainers are going to get kicked off the fence at some point by way of legislation. It's coming. And then many of them have even admitted this on social media, saying, well, if that happens, they take our tools away, or we'll just go back to our second jobs. Because they really had no skin in the game at the beginning by way of asking those questions as to what is really going on in the dog training world, David. So why are all these bad things happening?
Let me try
all the divisiveness.
I get what you're saying. Let me try to continue finding some clarity and common ground here, right? So you say dog training is not a learning-based exercise, and I believe the reason why you say dog training is not a learning-based exercise is specifically because if you look at it only from the lens of a learning-based exercise, it implies that it doesn't matter why the dog is doing the correct thing. All that matters is that you see them doing the correct thing, right? Let me finish that thought here for a second.
Sure, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
So what I would say is I could agree with that frame of reference. The reason why I don't like that phrase as a whole, though, is because dogs need to learn things, obviously. I think we could agree on the dogs need to either learn what to do or what not to do, right? Regardless of what way you're going to do it. They do have to learn things, right? There is a big component of learning at play, right? And I feel as though if we're working with the dog, let's say we're using treats, right? I think a lot of the reason why dog trainers will focus on teaching things and using motivation initially is because in your examples of working with a child, I could sit down and because the child understands the English language, right? I could articulate to them the expectations of them, the consequences for those expectations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? With a dog, that's impossible to do, obviously. Dogs don't understand the English language, right? We can't communicate with them from that kind of deep facet, right? So if I'm going to ask a dog to do something, I need to have a way to be able to articulate to them what it is that I ultimately want them to do or don't want them to do. No different than you would do with a child as you're setting the expectations with them. But then the important key component is that the dog or the child understands that they have to do that thing. It is a demand that's put on them. It is non-negotiable. It is non-optional.
Well, no, it's not about choices that way. That's the thing I get into. You're motivating dogs to respond at the very beginning of a relationship problem without the core ingredients I talk about, David, because the thing is I keep going back to the selfish child example.
But where is it wrong? But where is that wrong? I want you to articulate to me why what I'm saying is wrong.
Because at a superficial level, it's not just about the child's already selfish. Getting them to pick up their toys could be a good response, right? I mean, that could be.
But them understanding that they have to pick up the toys when we ask them to is the important thing.
No. But the parental role itself, how that's defined to the relationship. Okay, the role with how that parent is engaging and interacting with that child in terms of parental influence. Okay, in their airspace, interpersonal. Okay, I talk about dogs as social animals.
And being in their airspace, so you're in a position to ensure they can do, or that they have to do.
The dog training world has been totally focused, totally set up just at a superficial response level without those core ingredients coming in the right way to actually both, about reveal,
Dale,
right, to establish the foundation. Well, look at it, David.
Why it's wrong. You're not explaining why it's wrong.
It's wrong because
that's wrong.
It's wrong because of outcomes. Okay, outcomes means
the outcome is when the relationship they understand they have to do it.
That dogs are moving around the training environment for motivating agents for what they want, even without a motivating agent. This is the depth of the problem.
Not for what they want, right? They're doing it regardless of if they want to or not.
It's not about the sit down, come and stay that way.
No, it's about any behavior that we're trying to create or stop.
David, it's so superficial. A 6-year-old child can get a dog to respond with treats.
But we're not talking about treats. We're talking about the dog understanding they have to do it. Where am I missing something?
But the have to do part. Yes. See, that's the problem. The
demand part.
You
said many times these things have to be demands.
how influence comes into the level that it needs to come in.
So how you're enforcing the demand, is that what you're saying? Are you saying how we enforce the demand?
It's got to be personal. It's got to come in. It's got to be defined. It's got to come in a way that's going to generate a power play. It's going to generate conflict. You see the dog daddy. You see what happens to the dog daddy. That type of power play, right? I talk about the dog daddy. The problems with that type of. It has to be intentional interaction.
I'm talking about the method I just said, and you telling me why it's wrong. And I'm trying to figure out where what you're saying is wrong. So are you saying then it's not about the demand, it's about how the demand is being enforced? Where is it wrong? Where is the incorrectness of my statement?
It's about the process, about how it lines up, okay, how it's defined through how the demand
so
itself.
Where in that process is it wrong?
You're talking about a remote collar or using a correction within, okay, this idea that trains will learn with motivating dogs to respond. So this is where the 4 quadrants come in, right? With trying to firm up.
4 quadrants exist everywhere. What you're doing is utilizing 4 quadrants.
I'm not thinking about 4. No, I'm not.
You know, I might not be thinking about it, but you're using the 4 quadrants of learning.
No, I'm engaged. It's interaction based, David. It's not. It's not like
the way
learning.
we interact with each other, it could all be boiled down into the 4 quadrants.
No.
Why?
No, the 4 quadrants. No, it's not the 4 quadrants. Okay, when you talk about 4, because the 4 quadrants works off of this level of motivation. Okay,
dogs can be motivated to do something, or they can be motivated to try to avoid consequence or to be able to escape pressure.
But then you're launching into this is the thing about a motivator. The motivation.
It's all motivation, whether positive or negative.
The motivation is the relationship. You don't want to motivate dogs that way at the beginning because what are you dovetailing into?
If it were just the relationship, why would you use choke chains? You use tools. You use e-collars. You use choke chains. If the relationship is the only motivation, why do you need those tools?
No, influence is still coming through. So it's still attached through, again, defined in and through the interactions themselves, the extension of the person. So even tools take on a different meaning. We talk about a remote collar, how I use a remote collar. I use it as a secondary tool. I would never use it that way as a pivot point anyway with walking down the street with a dog.
Well, you use it to correct a dog in a crate. If you could use it to correct a dog's behavior in a crate, why can't you use it elsewhere?
When you're pushing that button, all right, when I talk about nudging the dog, when I talk about the level of dog's thinking, how I'm, being proactive with nudging the dog at
correcting
a certain point, the dog's expressing control. You can't, if you're trying to do that with a remote collar, you got a problem.
Because there's no direction to it.
Well, you're connected. Intentional control through the leash, David. It's like
a leash has direction.
It's going to give me feedback.
I've watched you like in some of your videos how you're giving your corrections or your nudges, right? And you're doing them in a way and in a direction that's getting the dog, like I watched one of your socialization ones yesterday, I think with a dog named Ace, and you had your dog out and you're trying to get Ace not to look at your dog, right? And he's looking over this way and you're correcting this way, which gets him to shift his attention that way to follow that correction. Yes, with an e-collar doesn't have the directional power to be able to do that same thing. That's why a choke chain or a pinch collar or a leash and flat collar.
But David, but when I talk about a remote collar not being an ideal tool for that, it's because to make the adjustment with the variance of influence, right? If I'm nudging the dog, right, at being proactive, the levels at which I'm doing that, it's when I'm doing that ahead of the curve of the dog's mind, just as the dog is starting to look towards, as control is starting to manifest, because again, the dog's there because the dog is reactive to other dogs, right? So I'm not waiting. So I'm nudging ahead of the dogs. The dog's going to be more agreeable to it. That makes sense to the dog. If I'm trying to work
it's very a leash and collar, any type of collar you want, is going to make more sense to a dog initially because of the fact that it has a clear direction to it, right? If you want the dog to shift its attention this way, they're going to feel and understand that pressure moving them in a particular way.
Well, it's not, if you watch it, but it's about what influence, it's not about, because even when I'm doing the push and pull, if you pay attention to the push and pull method, the dog's head isn't turning in because I'm pulling the leash in a certain direction. Okay, the push and pull, you'll see the dog's head, David. Influence is affecting the dog's mind. You'll see the dog's head go inwards.
Yes. No, right, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. So the dog is shifting its attention to you because you're becoming relevant, right? You're becoming relevant to that dog. The dog's like, wow, this dude's making me do shit. I better start paying attention to this guy. And as you apply pressure, as you apply influence, that happens.
The influence is intercepting. It's affecting the dog's focus.
You're becoming relevant.
That's right. It's drawing the dog's
You're becoming relevant to the dog in that moment, right?
More superficial language, but I'm just half teasing here. But yeah, the dog's focus is changing, Dave. Like, for example, if you watch my service dog training videos, like the 4-month process, gives you a better idea as motivation. Motivation, I will motivate a dog to respond.
Yeah, I heard you talk about that before. And obviously with service dogs, you're not dealing with an inherent relationship problem going into that. You're dealing with teaching a dog skills that they need to be a good service dog.
Many times I am walking into a relationship problem with these dogs, because these dogs oftentimes...
But when you're doing your task training, obviously at that point, you're probably past the relationship problem.
It's switching. Oh, that's right. So understand there's a sequence here, Dave. It's like, understand, like when I talk about cleaning up the relationship, right? Shifting the focus of the dog. Then once the focus is generated the right way, David, and then getting into motivating the response. You're probably looking at the clock here. We're probably over here a little bit.
You're fine. I got a couple more minutes. So
okay.
You can keep going.
All I'm saying is the service dog process really kind of highlights and shows how everything fits into place. Okay, so there's like a time and place to motivate the dog to respond.
Sure.
So, because when people look at my videos and say, because it's like, it's relationship focused at the beginning.
I think we agree on
and
this.
Then, to the balance, but we again, my encouragement to you, David,
can you for a second just throw out the balance trainer for a minute and just talk to me as if you didn't know I was a balanced dog trainer? Because me being a balanced dog trainer doesn't change the points that I'm making.
Well, it'd be the same response, because it wouldn't matter even if you're labeled as a balanced dog trainer. If we're having a talk like this, even if I'm doing a consult with somebody, there's a point we're going to hit where I'm lining this up. You understand? Like, there's going to be a point where I'm defining, what defines the process, the role of influence being dialed in, all the themes I talk about. That's going to happen, right? So it's not even about you
Has it not happened yet?
It's not about, because what's that?
Has it not happened yet? Have you not lined it up yet?
I'm trying.
All right.
Like my hope is maybe you'll be one of the guys that, and get back to your point, David. The goal here really is about dogs, like caring about dogs, about, reversing course and what's happening with the force-free movement in the dog training world. If it's really about, things making sense, turning this around, I'm just saying that it comes through clarity of understanding, even why all these situations are happening. Even through my Flipping the Script series, I've wavered even putting up that series, because my thing is, and this comes from my Christian walk. I'll put that out there. I know, but I've wavered because at the level of getting involved in this type of thing where it's so divisive and people get so upset and there's so much hostility, to me, because sometimes when I take down my videos, happened in the past where some trainer will think, oh, Dale took down his videos because they won some argument with getting personal. It's never about engaging. Like I give you kudos today for actually being the first, balanced trainer to actually want to engage with me this way. Sure. And I appreciate that, Dave. You seem like a nice guy. But here's the thing. When I talk about, all these situations happening, my hope is that this gets, by even the Flipping the Script series, you go through it, you don't hear me getting personal, like saying this guy's a loser.
I agree with that.
Or this guy's an idiot.
I didn't get that vibe.
And so, someone could challenge me the fact that, okay, I'm calling out these trainers, but what I'm doing, I'm calling out the problem. People take it as a personal affront because, it's like, people's identities. But my thing here with censorship, even saying, in order to get to the other side of a problem, we have a huge problem in the dog training world. You have to have the ability to be able to actually talk through it. Mm-hmm. You have to have the ability to actually, like we're doing today, like get some sort of clarity here. You could walk away and say, Dale's full of crap, or whatever you want to say, that's fine. But what I'm saying is I could leave the dog training world tomorrow, David, take down my videos. Things aren't going to change. You're going to see things continue to get worse in the dog training world. Sure. You're seeing all these bad things happen already. I'm just connecting some dots for people to say, this isn't some accident here, dude. To look through the lens of whether it's a balanced dog trainer lens or whatever, you have to look at the big picture. You have to line, because everything will make sense. Like, that's the thing that really is incredible to me. You look at everything happening in the dog training world, David. My, just like I said from the beginning, if there's something we're doing wrong, which there's something terribly wrong in the dog training world at this point in time, there's something we're doing wrong. We need to audit this properly to say, what is it? What's going on here?
Sure.
Perhaps we can agree on that.
I think we could definitely agree on that. And I think just for, not that I'm trying to rush out of this conversation, but I think a good way to kind of wrap this up and and I'll kind of give you my perspective on this kind of conversation and where I feel like I kind of am ending with this. And then obviously you could do the same. But I think my issues / opinions on everything are, And the reason why I wanted to have this conversation is, one, my problems with some of your flipping the script that you've done have nothing to do with you calling out individual trainers or, like you said, calling out, a product or anything like that. But it feels like you're almost using certain trainers to call out the overall balanced dog training without really deeply looking at what those individual trainers are achieving from a success standpoint. And the reason why I feel that way is because of how you conduct them, where you watch just a minute and a half of the video and you give your critiques of it and say, I already know how this is going to go, implying that every single balanced dog trainer is doing everything exactly the same, right? So that's one of the points. The other reason why I wanted to have this conversation is because I have no problem with how you train dogs, right? Obviously, you've been doing this for a very long time. You've got some, I went and looked at it, you got a handful of good, reviews and testimonials. You're getting results, you know what I mean? Like, that's all great. Like, I'm team, as long as the client is happy and we're getting results, like, do it how you want to do it, basically, right? I think the problem is, based on how we're having these conversations, it doesn't feel like what we're doing is that different. It feels like the only big difference that I could find between the way that you're doing things and the way that I'm doing things is, one, you don't use food ever, right? And my choice behind using the food, like I said, is just to create the clear picture before I'm going to start putting the demands on the dog. And then thing number two is that you choose to be more proactive with your corrections to try to stop the thinking process leading to the problematic behavior, where I care more about just teaching the dog to make the correct choices. And I feel like if you were to have a freaking spyglass on our training facility and watch us for freaking 3 months, you would see that we're achieving the same end goal, right? In my eyes, in my mind. And we could disagree on that all day, whatever, right? But I feel as though we're achieving the same end goal. In your mind, you just don't like the process leading to that, which is a whole separate conversation that obviously we don't have time to get into and all of that. But those are my biggest problems, is that you're looking at all balanced dog trainers as the same, when in actuality, many of us view things extremely differently and interact with our clients in a completely different way and communicate our methods in a completely different way. And I feel like our end results are probably very similar. And I feel like what we're doing is not that far apart. So that's my wrap up spiel on what I'm taking away from this conversation. So you could go ahead and
for opening here, yeah, David. Well, first, I appreciate you having me on. You've been very generous in your time, and nothing nasty between. I feel like the conversation's gone well.
Sure.
So to get back to the thing is, and again, we can kind of agree to disagree on the problem, because that's what it comes down to. It comes down to defining what is a process. There is truth. There is a real standard. I keep pushing that because, again, keep defaulting back to the dog training world. Okay, look at the big picture. Everything, there's no accidents or coincidence. I keep saying that. So my encouragement to anyone that is trying to understand, what I'm saying, it's not just about picking on balanced dog trainers or about, because if you look through my Flipping the Script series, right, wrong, or indifferent, and this is why, again, I have wavered about, raising my voice, how to do it, the dog training world, because my thought is this is going down anyway, and the only way it's going to reverse is for people to start to gain some clarity here as to why it is that all these bad things are happening. Because I certainly can't do it on my own. I can speak out about it, but I continue to do what I've always done: help individual dogs and owners ask those questions from the beginning, David, and just move forward from there. Raise my voice to it, and understand the complications and the challenges here with trainers that are looking at what I'm saying. But my hope is, and this is why I've always said, as things get worse and worse and worse, which they will, my hope is it will shake people loose enough to say what is really happening here. But not to the point where, it's like, okay, we got to sign off on the force-free movement fully. That's a terrible thing. I agree that the force-free, Zach George and people like that out there, but why are they even getting away with what they're saying? Why is it that he even has millions of followers in the first place? This comes through the problem here. If you look at everything I show, all the contradictions, all the problems, Dave, that's all I'm saying. So all to say that, I'm always going to go back to, again, because there's truth. So in regards to the conversation with whomever, I'm always going to get to that point of saying, this is what it is. Agree or disagree, I'm just going to say, this is it. This is a clarity. I'll put everything out transparently, nothing hidden. People put everything I say to the test. look at the dog training world before, but look at the dog training world. Look at all the problems before you even ask a question. That's what people should be doing. To say, what the heck's going on here? So all to say, David, I do appreciate you having me on. You've been very gracious, and you've been very nice, and you seem like a nice guy.
I think it was a good chat. I'm definitely glad we did it. And to end on a positive, lighthearted note, I know you're in Orlando. My wife and I go to Disney World probably 4 times a year. So maybe one of these days we'll actually link up and train some dogs.
David, I'll tell you, if you're ever down here, I'll take you out for a drink. We'll sit down. We'll have a discussion. And I'm being sincere.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I appreciate it, David, for having me on. Really do.
All right, Dale. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon. This will be live Monday. You feel free to use anything from it that you want to, obviously.
All right. Thanks very much, Dave.
All right. We'll talk soon.